for Newton is that many communities were in the midst of, final design on a project when these prices went through the roof, and they already had their funding authorized. In many cases, authorized through, the community or town votes, and they had to go back through the process again because the costs had gone up so much. So, our timing was a little more favorable here. We got some great value with the NECP project. We timed that really well, and then we didn't get back into construction or didn't get back into bidding again until we got through the hardest, the largest increases in inflation.
Right. Thank you to the Newton taxpayer, of which we all are. It's 8 o'clock. I'm just going to wait for a few more people to join. They're probably finishing up that last meeting. We need a few more members of the committee to join us. Councillor Kelly has joined.
The other joint meeting is just ending right now, so others will probably come soon.
Okay. We need one. Councillor Kalis. I'm going to start the meeting and I'll introduce people as they come in, but this could be a lengthy meeting, so I don't want to start too late. So good evening and welcome to a special meeting, joint meeting of Public Facilities and Finance. The Finance Committee will be joining us very shortly. We're going to start with item 35323 before Public Facilities. My name's Allison Leary, City Councilor at Large from Ward 1 and Chair of the committee. At the beginning of the meeting, I'm joined by Councillor Mark Laredo at Large from Ward 7, Councillor Andrew Kelly at Large from Ward 3, Councillor David Kalis at Large from Ward 8. And I think that's all of the committee right now. And Evan, you can let me know if anyone else joins that I'm not seeing. Our committee, we're joined by our committee clerk, Evan Cudmore.
Councillor Gentile has also joined. Councillor Kelly.
Yes, okay. I got Councillor Kelly, Councillor Gentile, Councillor at Large from Ward 4. And I see Chair Grossman has joined as well. I'll let her introduce her committee.
Thank you. You guys made the Zoom transition more quickly than I did from meeting to meeting. Yeah. So welcome everybody to the Finance Committee portion of our joint meeting. At the beginning of the meeting, I'm joined by Councillor Oliver from Ward 1. Pretty sure I saw Councillor Norton on here from Ward 2, Councillor Maliki from Ward 3, Councillor Gentile from Ward 4, Councillor Humphrey from Ward 5, Councillor Noel from Ward 6. Councillor Noel, are you here yet? I actually don't see her, but I'm sure she'll be joining in a second. And Councillor Kalis, Vice Chair of the committee from Ward 8. So before us this evening, we have obviously a number of items, but the first two items are related. So that's 353-23, the Design Review Committee petition pursuant to Section 5-58 for schematic design and site approval for the Countryside School project. And then I'm going to put before us collectively item 360-23, which is the authorization to borrow $74,730,950 for the construction of the Countryside School project. My intent to handle this procedurally is, Commissioner Morse, to recognize you, have you introduce the project, and then we have a public hearing that needs to occur pursuant to the 558 site approval in public facilities specifically. So once Commissioner Morse and his team goes over this, I'm going to turn it to Chair Leary to go into the public hearing, and then we will be able to vote one after the other after the conclusion of the public hearing and any other discussion.
Councillor Grossman, I was
Yes.
just pointing out earlier before you joined that 2 of the items are specific to each of our committees. So I don't think that would be a joint vote. So 558 is just public facilities. And then our last item, 377, is just finance, right?
Yes, absolutely. And
Okay.
we have to take the 558 vote first. I just meant that we can discuss everything together and then
Sure.
procedurally break it into the hearing, discuss again, and then take each vote in turn after that.
Okay. Sounds like
Does
a
that
plan.
make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Morse, let me turn it to you.
Thank you very much. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you coming out this evening. I know there's a healthy agenda, so we will move quickly. So the presentation that we're going to be giving tonight is very, very similar to the one that we gave about 5 weeks ago to public facilities and several other members here. We also have several counselors who have followed the Countryside School project, either through the Design Review Committee or through the Countryside School Building Committee for a few years now. So, but that said, we have other members here this evening, and we want to make sure we're given an opportunity to provide an update to all of you as well. So this evening, I'm joined by members from our design team, Danisco Design. So we have Donna Danisco and Vivian, as well as I believe Ann Davis I saw on the call too. And then we're also joined by members of our owner's project manager. I saw Steve Brown here, and Mike Burton, I don't think is on the call, but he is always with us. And of course, we have members of our Countryside School Building Committee, school committee members, and Dr. Nolan is here as well. And of course, Alex Valcarsi, my deputy commissioner. So with that, I will turn it right over to Vivian to run through the presentation. Again, we will move fairly quickly, but we can always go back to any slides and recap anything that folks would like.
Great. Thank you, Josh. I will do my very best to not be long-winded. So let me share my screen. All right. Thank you, everyone, for meeting with us today. We're really excited to move along on this project. We have just completed the schematic design phase for this project and now are awaiting the MSBA's board approval to move on to the actual design and construction documents phase of this project. Looking for the vote for site plan approval, and raring to go. So during the schematic design phase, we have had many meetings with folks from the city and agencies, as well as fire prevention, folks such as Mark Welch for tree protection and removal. And our drawings really do reflect a lot of conversation, a lot of feedback, and many responses to comments. So some project summary metrics. The proposed building is a 3-story building. It is 76,000 gross square feet, designed for 465 students, grades K through 5. The program includes 21 general ed classrooms. There are also a special ed program that is integrated within the school setting, and the building is designed to be fully accessible. We do have several we are designing this building to be fully sustainable. We have goals of reaching LEED Gold, which our previous schools for Newton had reached that goal. We also have an EUI goal of 25 or below. It will be an all-electric building. We're looking to install geothermal wells, as well as a VRF system. The proposed site has many really great features. I'm not going to get into it right now. I'll talk about that as we talk about the site. So many of you know that the site does sit within, most of the site sits within the 100-year floodplain. The flood elevation, base flood elevation, is at 112.4. Our building, as we were looking at designing this structure, seemed to make sense to try to place it at the highest point of the site. Unfortunately, there really isn't too high of a point except for this corner here. North is to the right, so this is the northeast corner. When we tested different locations on the site, really it confirmed that this location made the most amount of sense given the components. We do have staff parking for 55 folks here on the northwest corner of the site. We have a playground as well as a play structure area designed to be fully accessible. The play area will allow for painted asphalt for kids to run and play along, as well as basketball. There will be a couple of outdoor learning spaces, one right next to the gym. The gym is in this corner, and another one that is located close to the play structure area. We've also allocated space for a softball field to replace the one that we are taking over, which currently exists on this corner here. The building is designed to be at elevation 114 and a half, which is about 3.5 feet below the street elevation at Dedham Street North. This is the north side of the school. It sort of straddles the upper and lower. The site really does drop from Dedham Street North down almost 9 to 10 feet to the lowest areas. And so the playground area is actually another 4.5 feet below our first floor. We have a series of ramps to make the building completely accessible. It's universally designed, so everyone going in and out towards the playground area go in and out the same way, up and down the ramps. On the northeast corner, which is really the most public face, we have a plaza that is designed to pretty much be at the same elevation of the new school. Bus drop-off occurs on Dedham Street North with a protected drop-off area median strip, and parent drop-off would occur on Dedham Street East. There are no ramps actually on this side of the school because we are down 3.5 feet. We're able to accomplish the grade change by sloped walkways. I believe you all have a copy of the FAQs that we have put together. I'm not going to get into any of these at this point, but we can save some of these questions if there are any for after the presentation. We do talk about what peak flow does, flooding potential, and what storm events might look like in the future. So as we design the school, we're really cognizant of how we're impacting the flood storage on the site. We cannot exceed, our building volume cannot exceed what the existing building volume currently takes up along the site. So what we have been able to do is actually increase the amount of flood storage by designing a footprint that is more compact than the existing school, and also by locating it in the highest corner of the site, we're able to take advantage of some of the space, some of the ground area that is above the 100-year flood elevation. Our building is designed as an L shape. The first floor really has the connection to the community. We have community use spaces that are accessible from both the Dedham Street North and East along this plaza, as well as from the playground area. A pathway that currently exists from the Andrew Street neighborhood will remain in place, will improve that connection, and will bring visitors, students, and families from that neighborhood into the playground area and then into the school. The academic wing is designed so that it has a north-south orientation where it's the easiest to control solar glare. On the north side, there is no solar glare to worry about, and on the south side, it's much easier to control that southern daylight sunlight than it would be on the east-west orientation. The cafeteria, as well as the gymnasium, both have direct access also to the playground. On the second floor, again, we have, actually the first floor is where the kindergarten classrooms are. The second floor would contain 2 grades of classrooms. They are organized around project areas, much like the Zervis School is organized. These are dedicated spaces for pull-out instruction, small group instruction, and project-based learning. The media center or library is also on the second floor, kind of centrally located, very accessible via an elevator, as well as two sets of stairs. It's across the hallway from the art room, which provides a really great opportunity to create a gallery type of space along the corridor. And on the third floor, we have three grades that are organized around three project areas. There are also spaces that are dedicated for special ed, as well as for support, that are designed to be classroom size. So it provides great flexibility for future enrollment should the need arise. If there are different amounts of students per grade, there's the flexibility of moving grades to different floors as needed. And then on the roof, we have a direct stair access to equipment and everything else that occurs on the roof. We have met with public safety and we've talked about accessing that roof. We provided a second way into or onto the roof from another set of stairs through a roof hatch at this point. What you'll see in gray is that this area on the roof is designed to accommodate future photovoltaic panels. We have looked at equipment location, and as we head into the design development phase, we're going to really study that and hone in on where that makes the most amount of sense. But our goal is to provide as much area on the roof for the PVs as possible. So a very big consideration for the site is how we design for stormwater. The site is bounded by the South Meadowbrook on the south, an intermittent stream, as well as a wetland on the west. And there are also riverfront setbacks. The existing school, the reason we really do need to replace it is because of its location in the lowest portion of the site, the wettest portion of the site. So we do have several components that are being folded into the site design that will accommodate the site, the stormwater. The parking lot, first off, is going to be porous pavement. The play structure area will have an under drain system and also will be porous. We have several stormwater features, a recharge structure below grade at the plaza, a rain garden, bioretention basins, and as well as an infiltration trench. There are several existing outfalls that we will be maintaining and tying into. There's also a single drain that currently exists from Dedham Street North that we will not be touching, but will be maintaining. There will be no increase in peak rates of stormwater discharge off the site. The site utilities really are along most of them are along Dedham Street East, which is where we are tying into. Our mechanical space is located very close to Dedham Street East. As we also had discussions with public safety, we've located 2 additional new fire hydrants. There is one existing one that is located on the corner of Walnut Street and Dedham Street North. But this will provide great access to hydrants. We'll also tie into some standpipe system within the building. The building is going to be fully sprinkled. In discussing tree removal and protection with Mark Welch, we've put together a preliminary planting plan for trees. We will be, again, addressing planting in more detail during the design development phase. But at this point, we're looking to replace about 144 caliper inches of trees along the site. We do need to replace some of them where we're proposing a field. We'll also be working with DPW and the Conservation Commission along the intermittent stream area to plant more trees. I think we addressed this already, where circulation around the site, we've separated the bus and the parent drop-off area to provide the most safety for all the kids. We are locating a couple of public accessible spaces along Dedham Street East. We're going to be continuing to look at providing more accessible spaces or a drop-off area that is accessible as well. But at this point, the entire site is accessible, and we are continuing the connections to the surrounding neighborhoods with improving sidewalks and walkways. We are also providing a 360-degree access around the building for emergency vehicles. And we've reviewed this also with the fire department and located areas where the apparatus would actually be located during events. So we've put together a few views of the proposed building. This is, again, end of schematic design. We are continuing to look at the materials, the windows, the proportions. We're really excited about this actually because we're looking at materials in more detail. We'll be sharing that with the DRC in upcoming meetings as well as working groups. So here's a view of the plaza entrance on the corner of Dedham Street East and West. I'm just going to take you around the building clockwise. So moving down Dedham Street East, you'll see this enclosure actually houses the generator, and the service area is right behind that with mechanical space and receiving right here. Now, as we move further out, you'll see the views that the neighbors may see as they're walking by, creating some really nice finishes, and also using trees and shrubs to screen items such as generators that are kind of necessary for a school building. And here's a view of the loading area. And then moving back a little bit, we will have some more plantings along this area, which skirt the walkway that leads to and from Andrew Street. And then as we skirt around to the playground side of the school, you'll see that we have two sets of ramps. They are not skinny ramps at all. We're integrating that with the landscape to really make it feel like it's part of the building and part of the landscape. Here's another view of the ramp system. And what you'll see in front of you here is the cafeteria. We want to provide as much daylight in as possible so that folks sitting in the cafeteria can really enjoy looking out, seeing the kids play. And then on the second floor is the media center library, also very glassy. We're looking at building materials that are primarily masonry. It is really the most durable and cost effective. We're sprinkling in some metal panel here and there, but for the most part, you're going to see brick, ground face block, and then just a little bit of paneling up high. Here's the view as we skirt around towards Dedham Street North, looking back towards the building. What I failed to mention is that there are a series of very mature trees on the site. These are the ones that are along the embankment at Dedham Street North that we are able to, as much as we can, protect and maintain. So during construction, we have we'll be providing some tree protection around these really beautiful trees. And then a view looking up at Dedham Street North and the bus drop off. And back to the front. So I apologize. I forgot to introduce Janet Bernardo, who's with the Horsley Witten Group. She is our civil and wetlands consultant and has been really instrumental in helping us navigate the design for this building on the site. So with that, Josh, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Vivian. So just briefly, we've had just a big thank you to the Countryside community. Over the last couple of years, we've had a lot of residents who have followed the project, attended a lot of the meetings. We've heard from them throughout. I think generally very supportive of the project and the design. Not surprisingly, this shouldn't come as a shock to the counselors here this evening. Their number one concerns expressed from day one were about traffic and the speed of cars in the neighborhood. Not directly related to the Countryside School project, but certainly something that we will need to address as we move forward in the next phase of design. But with that, I'm happy to turn it back over to Councilor Leary, and we can get into Q&A and the public hearing.
Thank you very much, Josh, and thank you for the presentation, Ms. Lowe. This is a public hearing. I just wanted to see if there were any questions from members of the council before I opened the public hearing. And I am not seeing any hands. So, by the way, I've neglected to introduce Councilor Norton from Ward 2, the ward councilor who also has joined us at the beginning of this meeting. So, could I get a motion to open the public hearing, please?
So moved.
So moved from Councilor Kalus. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the public hearing is open. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this item?
I would.
Okay, Ms. Spiegel, please go ahead. But you're at 176 Dedham Street, it looks like.
Yes, so I live at 176 Dedham Street, right in the intersection. My driveway actually goes into the intersection of Dedham Street and Walnut Street. I reviewed the presentation ahead of time, so I'll try to keep my points succinct. But I just wanted to convey the concerns I have regarding the traffic flow in the intersection, and I hope you take it as quite seriously. I've witnessed the near misses from my living room window for 7 years, so very much so aware of the issues that are there, and then my concerns moving forward. So the Dedham Street and Walnut Street intersection is very congested. The stop sign in front of my house is considered quote unquote new, and people still don't stop. And then I just wanted you to consider my driveway and then my neighbors up the hill at 1412 Walnut Street. Our driveways actually go into the intersection. So I want to make sure that that's being considered as we talk about. I saw in the plans there's some talk about actually reworking the intersection. Right now the crosswalk, it goes from the corner of Dedham Street East to pretty much my driveway. A lot of the pedestrians kind of like cut corners and go directly to my driveway. And I noted that on your intersection rework that you're going to move the location of the Dedham Street North crosswalk to be a little further away from the bottleneck, but it doesn't appear as though the crosswalk in front of my house was going to be moved. When I'm trying to back out of my driveway between the cars that are parked in the area, the cars that are coming from all directions and don't necessarily stop, and the pedestrians, it is very difficult for me to move at any time of the day. So even I want you to consider that when you're thinking about kids that don't necessarily go to school or leave school when the crossing guard is there. Like, these are kids that are going to be at risk with the way the intersection is now. So one thing I was wondering is if you could move the crosswalk further down the street from the intersection. I think it would be a bit safer just because there's just so much going on in the intersection. And then another thought I had is in the schematic where you showed the flow of traffic and pickup drop off, it looks like the parental pickup and drop off area is on the street, both on the school side of the street and the residential part of the street on Dedham Street East. in front of my house and a few neighbors down. That's going to add to the pedestrian traffic in the crosswalk. And I really strongly believe that the pickup drop off in the street is adding to the congestion in the intersection. We'll have more aggressive drivers trying to get their spot in that. And I really strongly believe that off-site pickup and drop off needs to be provided, because right now it's just so crazy on our one lane street with this intersection that's a safety nightmare. I think that off-street parking needs to be considered.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Spiegel, for your comments. I do think this is an opportunity for us to improve the safety of the street and do some traffic calming as this building is done. And I'm sure the members of the council and your Ward 8 councilors will be looking at that, and also Commissioner Morse as well. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, you're welcome. So is the current plan that you're voting on today, is that the plan that's going to be, or is there any chance for changing the flow of traffic or off-street parking or drop off?
Yeah, that's separate actually. We're doing, this is a schematic design and site plan approval for the design and of the new school.
Okay, so off-street drop off and pickup is considered separate?
That would probably be part of the discussion, but later on they'll get much more into the weeds on that. We have a lot of experience with building new schools. Yes. And figuring out these problems. It's not the first time, that we've been working on this, and I've been very proud and happy to see how those schools have come out. So I'm feeling very positive about this school as well. So if you don't mind, Ms. Spiegel, I'd like to go on to the next couple. I see two more hands up. So I see Van and Alice Langton I'd like to recognize you. Please just state your address.
Our address is 198 Dedham Street, directly across from the entrance to the school where we have lived for 53 years.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you. Please go ahead.
I saw the picture you showed of the school. I didn't see it for a great period of time. It looks very unattractive. It looks like 4 apartment buildings. And I don't know what the model is, but I'd like to understand what its goal is. I've seen Zervis and I've seen Ainger, and they're lovely. But this does not look like it has any loveliness about it. And we do live opposite the school. We won't live forever, but still.
A related question before you answer, Ms. Leary, is how fixed is this? Our conversation tonight, you're hearing from the public, and are you going to take a vote tonight to approve the plans you've just shared with us? And once they're approved, are they open to any change, or are we, we're talking to you and you're hearing from us, but is this already determined either yes or no tonight? And if you vote yes, it goes forward without change, or is there a possibility?
No, well, I can just say that right now we're still reviewing the plan, and changes can still be made, especially design issues. This is a broad overview that we're voting on tonight. But if you would like, our commissioner Josh Morse could speak to that a little bit more about how that goes. But it is a long process. We do often make tweaks and changes to design as we go along. But the larger, like where the building sits on the site, is pretty much in stone at this point. But there's a lot of other things that could be considered. Commissioner, do you want to comment on that at all?
Sure, be happy to. So it's a great question. So as Councilor Leary pointed out, what the vote is tonight is really about the site orientation. It does not mean that it can't continue to be refined, but the building footprint after tonight, if the vote occurs, would be pretty well locked into place. But what the building looks like would continue to evolve, and that's a product of public comment. We certainly, at this stage, I would say that for all of our projects, if you go back and look at where we're at this phase versus where we ended up, the look of the building evolves quite a bit in the next year plus of design process. The other thing I would point out is I'm glad to hear that you liked the Ainger School, because the design team here tonight, Danisco, designed the Ainger School.
Very differently.
Very differently, yes. But the Ainger School looked very different when we were at this phase. So the renderings are important because we're dealing with the state, and they require us to be a little further along. So we have to provide some renderings, but they don't necessarily completely reflect what our vision is for the school.
If I could just, I don't want to occupy the whole evening, but I just wanted one other question relating to that. I couldn't tell from what I was seeing there where the building sits on the property. We're directly across from the building now, and we see the whole building. My sense is it's going to be moving up closer to the intersection of Dedham and Walnut, where Dedham turns at Walnut, and moving up more up the hill, opening up more of the wetlands area that the bill has been sitting in for all these years. Am I correct about that?
You are correct, sir.
Can you just tell me what the model for this school is? Because it looks like 4 apartment buildings, and I can't see what else it looks like. Maybe it's supposed to look like something lovely.
So typically the renderings are meant to establish the massing so that we get a sense as to, you know, how large the building is, its scale to the community, its scale to adjacent structures and trees. But ultimately the design elements and the building materials and the colors and even the massing can and will evolve after this phase.
But it will be 4 buildings?
Well, it's not 4 separate buildings. They're different parts.
I presume they're connected. Yeah.
Yeah, but typically these buildings, these schools have an academic wing and then a gymnasium, a cafeteria, an admin, and they tend to look like a 3 or 4 kind of clustered structure. And you do that typically because you're trying to break up the massing. You don't necessarily want one big box.
I see.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Kalis, I see your hand up. This is your ward. Did you want to respond?
I just wanted to let Caitlin Spiegel, everybody, all of the public, that we've been meeting for about a year on this, and the public's been invited. It's unfortunate that you didn't know about that, but if you have questions after tonight, please feel free to contact me. My phone number is on the website, City Councilor for Ward 8, and you can call me anytime except for sleeping hours. And I'll be happy to talk to you through whatever questions you have, and where Ms. Spiegel, you have specific questions about what might be moved, I can work with you on your ideas and then get them back to the team.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kalis.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Laredo, I see your hand is up too. Did you want to comment?
No, I'm going to wait to Mr. Rao speaks, and then when you're done with the public hearing, I have a couple of questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll recognize Alan Rao. Could you please state your address?
Yes, thank you. Alan Rao, I'm at the 180 Dedham Street, just across the school, and I agree with my neighbor's comments, and also want to see more. And now I just want to focus on 4 points I think I had not mentioned. About special ed, it looks like at the corner of the 3rd floor. But usually the special eds, not just different delays, but also some of the kids also has physical disabilities. So the accessibility, wheelchairs, and where the park space, drop-off spaces for the special ed vans, those other things need to be considered. So we have, Countryside is very famous for inclusions. So that is one of the key area I think is very much missing. Second part is the parking entrance. I don't know whether you want to consider that where's a big slope, and it can be a dangerous slide in the winter for those teachers or anyone to drive into that area, which is very close to the corner. As you know, at that area, a couple of years ago, there was a foreign student, Japanese students, actually fly over there, hit the tree, and died. And after the helicopter rescue, so that is a very dangerous area to go in and out because the site and access is very. So that is a wrong place for the parking access. And the third point is about the footprint. And it looks like now still bigger than the old ones. And the old ones, if you look at not all about the concrete floors, grounds, but just the building footprint is much bigger and the new ones. I think I will also want the commissions to councilors consider the legacy old places, although in the wetlands, because the legacy land, you can reuse that area, put it on the streets and whatever it needs to be, or even in the new places and new locations. But to lift it, for example, get it stretched a little bit higher. If you really want to get the cars to go in, you can still occupy some of the space above the car spaces to stretch a little bit longer. Then you allow yourself to push the building away from the street, because it do need some access, including emergency access or including the people waiting, parents waiting, because the front yard is really just too small. Not to consider other areas like drop off kid student, then the corner will be terrible to manage for anyone to drop off and also pick up at the same time. And my fourth point, very brief, is that I think the architects go for odd shapes, but didn't make it pretty. And I would love the odd shapes added the special design and the total cost. So I want to think of make it simple, but make it beautiful, like my Latin teacher and neighbor said. And they need more rendering. The rendering right now, remove all those ugly poles and other areas, is far away from the reality right now. And I think when you look at the scale, and there will be a much bad shape when we just have that few pictures. We'd love to see a model. We'd love to see a video or 3D simulations, if you can provide that for us to make more comments.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Rao, for your comments. Commissioner, did you want to respond to any of those points? Brief. I mean, I know we don't want to take too much time, but I do want to give members of the public an opportunity to be heard and responded to.
Yeah, briefly, I would just say that great comments. I appreciate those, Alan. So the site and building will be universally accessible. So they will not only comply with ADA and MAAB requirements, but they will, again, be universally accessible. There's a district-wide special education program there, so we're keenly aware of that. And we've spent a lot of time working with the building committee, the design review committee, the community, and our design team to ensure that we are having a welcoming, barrier-free, and inclusive design. But that said, we do have some topography challenges that we're working through, and you see that reflected in the drawings and the rendering so far. So the transition from Dedham Street North down to the parking lot, that slope is something that we have studied and worked with Danisco Design and their subconsultants. That's something that we've certainly considered, and that slope is something that we've engineered in a way that we feel is appropriate and safe, both for staff vehicles, visitors, and for the special education vans that will be coming and going from that location. I did want to just mention that I'm not sure if your comment was questioning whether we had a good location for the special education vans, but those are located, the drop off and pickup are located in that staff parking lot, and there is a fully accessible access point there. And that's where we'll expect a lot of the students and parents to come to the school as well. So as well as the staff. So we have the building has two main entrances, one off the corner of Walnut and Dedham, and the other from the rear, where a lot of the school will walk to or walk up to. So I think those are the
right now, most of the special ed is right now in all school almost is on the first floor, but you put them on the third floor in this building.
So the special education spaces, DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, requires that the special education spaces be dispersed throughout the entire school. So you'll find special education spaces on the first, second, and third floor. They are completely inclusive in the design, and we're mandated to do that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Yep.
Councilor Laredo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few questions, and first, I just appreciate the work that's gone into citing this on admittedly a very difficult site to work with, given the stream and other wetlands constraints there. So, just a number of questions, Commissioner. Is there any basement space here at all?
There is not.
So there's no. Just so we're clear, there's no basement. It's on a slab essentially.
That is correct.
Okay, so we don't know. That's reassuring, obviously, given the flooding issues. Second, you mentioned just now the two entrances, and I recall that we've been working hard at particularly elementary schools to try to limit us to one entrance for security issues, for student safety. How do you envision the two entrances working in that regard?
So it's a great question, Counselor. So back when we started Ainger Zervis Cabot, really when we started Ainger, we were really focused on a single point of entry. That evolved a bit. At Zervis, you'll see there's dual entry opportunities there. But what really I think is important, and Cabot's the same, but what's really important is line of sights. So what you'll see is that when we have dual points of entry, we want to have good line of sight from the office admin area to be able to easily see both of those locations. The other thing that I think we recognized during the pandemic is that the opportunity to have students coming and going through multiple entrances helps avoid those real, tight clusters of students congregating at drop-off and pickup. So that was a bit of a benefit. I think that in the long term, that will not be as much of a concern. I'm going out on a limb there, but I do think there are benefits just from an operation standpoint to have 2 points of entrance and exit, provided that there's good line of sight.
All right. Again, that's just a detail I certainly would defer to the school staff on working with you, but I'm comforted by that. And Councilor Kalis, I'm sure you're talking to those folks as well. And I think that's an important point. Next question. I did note that some of the mechanicals are towards the front of the school. I know you're trying to screen them. I understand that's really difficult. I think aesthetically, anything we can do to push those mechanicals away from the street would be good. Screening will be helpful, but not enough if we're trying to make a visually attractive school that's very close to the street. So that's just as you're evolving, I'd suggest that. Can you explain to me why the first floor in many areas is somewhat recessed? Is that a design feature? Is that for aesthetics? Is there some benefit to light and ventilation in those the first and second floors? What's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, so I'll let Vivian speak to this, but we do this. People don't realize it, but we actually did this at Ainger Zervis Cabot. It's subtle, but we do it because with the stage in the cafetorium, we want to have that elevated stage, but in order to do that, you have to have slab depressions and different elevations on that ground on the first floor. But Vivian, if you want to speak to the specifics at Countryside, feel free.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't being clear. It wasn't the elevations internally, it was that the outside of the first floor is recessed from the second and third floors.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So the first floor footprint is smaller than the second and third floor, and the primary reason that we're doing that has to do with our site restrictions with regards to flooding and flood storage. So we're trying to keep a very small footprint to minimize the amount of flood storage capacity that we are consuming, for lack of a better word. So by keeping that tight footprint and then coming out on the second and third floors, it allows us to improve the flood storage capacity on the site. But Vivian, Janet, feel free to jump in on that.
Yep. So that is part of the reason. The other is exactly what she said, Commissioner Morris, is the fact that the program is really, we always say that it really gives the building form. So the educational program, as it evolved and as we reviewed it with the school principal and Newton Public Schools, we were asked to place the kindergarten classrooms on the first floor, and so it's a puzzle, right? So it's kind of like if you move something here, you need to move something else there. So because the program for academic spaces is slightly smaller on the first floor than it is on the upper floors, we have a smaller footprint. And because of that, it does help with compensatory flood storage. What that does also, it helped us to provide a sheltered walkway, a sheltered ramp that leads from the van drop-off area to the school. So it kind of serves a couple of duties.
So, Ms. Lowell, could I just respond quickly to that? So I can understand certainly in that portion where you're trying to get from the van into the school, but it's elsewhere as well. And I guess I wonder, are you going to be affecting the ability of the students on the first floor to have light, since you're going to have essentially shadowing above them? I have to say, I personally don't find that as aesthetically pleasing. Aesthetics are always in the eye of the beholder, obviously. And I do wonder if really there's that much of a savings on the first floor footprint that warrants that essentially recessed area. You don't have to respond. I want to put those out there. I know this is evolving. And last and simple question. I did notice a telephone pole in the middle of the sidewalk on the schematic. I am hopeful that we don't have that in front of the school. It seems to me this is a good opportunity to underground properly from the utilities so that the exterior of the school is free and clear. That, I think, aesthetically, that's much more pleasing. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilor Rado. I'm going to recognize Councilor Norton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've been pretty vocal about this in the past, so I'm not going to vote for this project because I continue to think it does not make sense to put a school in a flood zone, and I appreciate the new materials that we've received. But in general, I think that our engineers are going to do their best and our city staff are going to do their best, but Mother Nature is going to win, and the amount of water that is coming is biblical, and I think we're going to regret this. I'm not going to make a big thing about it because I know this is going to get approved, but I'm hoping that I'm wrong, and I'm never in the opportunity to say I told you so.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilor Norton. I don't see any other city councilors hands up. I am going to take a motion to close the public hearing.
I think
So moved.
I'm sorry, Councilor Kalis.
I think we should just take their hands are up, so I think we should take those and then close the public hearing.
Okay, I thought those hands were still up as before. Is there, Ms. Spiegel, did you want to comment again?
Yes, I just wanted to piggyback on what Emily Norton just said. Yeah, I wondered the same thing, putting so much money into a facility in wetlands and flood zone for 496 students. Has the school committee entertained the idea of possibly making a nearby school larger for these students? I know there's Memorial Spalding not too far away, or other various schools. Like, does it make sense for Countryside School to even be there?
Okay. Well, I think that we've had this discussion, and I will say there are other people that do not agree with Councilor Norton. I'm one of them. But however, I will let if there's a member of the school committee that wants to speak on this, or Commissioner Morse, if you would like to speak to what we have gone through prior in terms of deciding on this project.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version because it's very lengthy. But so we studied 155 locations throughout the city of Newton over the last well, not for 2 years, but for an extended period of time at the beginning of the project. Used a criteria matrix that we've used pretty successfully on our school projects over the last 15 years or so. Whittled those sites down to a short list of about a half dozen. Of the half dozen, the other locations all were either at the very edge of the Countryside School District or in locations that had even harder site issues than we're dealing with at the Countryside School site. Ultimately, when we looked at it based on the Countryside School District and where the students are located, based on where the student density is, the Countryside School site made the most sense, not only from a cost perspective, but from a neighborhood school perspective, from a quality of education for the Countryside School District perspective. And then I would just say, Caitlin, I'd be happy to send you the information that the counselors are referring to regarding, there's about 10 bullet points that I think really offer some assurances with regards to any flooding issues with this site. So the school, we breezed over it earlier on, but in the previous meeting, we discussed the building. The new building is being sited above the 500-year floodplain. And there's some very, very powerful metrics that Horsley Witten has put together that I'd be happy to send along.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Do the Lanks want to make another comment? I see your hands are up.
I do. Alice Langton, thank you. I am also very wary of the flooding, and I want to know what flood storage capacity means.
Okay.
The term has been used several times. I don't know what it means.
Commissioner, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Well, actually, why don't we have Janet speak if you don't mind?
Sure. I'm Janet Bernardo. I'm a professional engineer with the Horsley Witten Group, and we did the flood study. Basically, the requirement is if there's flood storage currently on the school property, the playing fields.
What does it mean?
It means that if the waters rise up from the brook, so it rains and rains and rains and rains, rains, the waters start to rise up, the groundwater is saturated with water, the ground surface, and then it keeps rising because it just keeps raining. And then it starts to overtop the banks, and it would go into the school, like the current school, that kind of floods the basement.
Oh, kind of. They have to tie down the oil tanks.
And then the playing fields, like all the current playing fields, the playground, and the existing school are all within the area that's considered floodplain and would be covered with water if it rained so much that it would just fill up. Does that make sense?
But then the question is, what is it we're doing about that? How are we mitigating that?
So what we have to do is we have to provide a foot by foot increment. So we look at every foot that the water could go up, and the 100-year flood elevation. So it's a percentage that Federal Emergency Management, they come up with this elevation after doing various studies, and it's 112. It's 112.4. That's the elevation, and the brook is at Vivian, now I've forgotten what the brook elevation is, and I've had those numbers so often. 108. And so it has like 4 feet to work with, that it would flood above the wetlands and above the playing field. And so we have to replicate that in the same storage area. So we have to be able to put back that volume of water with the new located school, so that you're not losing it. We just have to provide it.
Provide so that you can hold that much water.
So if it rains again, if it rains so much that floods, that area would all be full of water, we don't push it someplace else. We keep it where it is. Right now, we are replicating it 1 for 1. So if you had, a cup of water and you had a second cup of water that's empty and you poured it in, so now you have equal water. So you have to have the same amount. You have one cup, and then you're pouring it into the second cup so that it's equal. It has to be equal. So whatever we make out of it, maybe that wasn't a very good analogy, sorry. That has to be, the grading has to be equal.
Jan, can I jump in? This actually might make it easier, and I'll give credit where credit's due. Alex, my deputy, uses this analogy very, very often. So think of it like a brick in a bathtub. So if you fill your bathtub with a couple inches of water and you put a brick in it, that brick displaces some water and causes it to rise. Think of that current brick as the existing Countryside School. When we take that brick out of the bathtub, the water level will come down a little bit, but you've got a little more room before the bathtub overflows. The new school cannot exceed the amount of water that we're displacing with that original brick. So it has to be the same size or smaller. In this case, it's going to be a smaller brick, which means there's more capacity on that site to handle future flooding events.
Right.
Yeah, Alice, basically, they just want to make that old building place become a lower baseball playground, field, and like a swimming pool during the heavy rain season. Hope it not overflow over the street to our side.
I'd like to understand, because I know you're going by these records of 100-year storm and a 500-year storm, but you do know, as everyone does, that the weather is changing. Yes. And we are not really aware of exactly how it's going to change.
Of course.
And I think that planning on the basis of what used to be true before we knew that everything is changing is maybe a little inappropriate.
So we are having the finished floor elevation of the new school will be 2 feet higher than what the projected 100-year storm elevation is. So it's projected to be 112.4, and the new school will go up to 114.5. So there's a 2 feet freeboard, extra that was there to take that into consideration. And it's the same. We're still having to show the same. What's happening today, we have to replicate it the same exact way. So we're not taking up more flood area. We're not putting in a larger footprint building to take up flood storage.
So I think what might be really helpful.
I just want to understand, is the storage place for the mud, for the water, is it the school that would hold water up to 100 and...
The existing school, you mean? Yeah,
no, the school that's built, you're building.
Well, the existing school, no, this existing school is what the brick is, as Josh was talking about the brick. So the existing school is one brick, and the proposed school is a new brick. So one brick comes out, and then brick goes back in, but it can't displace any more water than the existing school currently does.
So just real quickly, the new school we would not be storing water in the new school. So I just wanted, this is very brief, but I think it really hits home the point here. The most rainfall in a 24-hour period in the history of the Commonwealth was in 1955, when Hurricane Diane dropped 18.15 inches of rain in 24 hours in Westfield, Mass. The new Countryside School that we're proposing, the parking lot, not even the school, so the parking lot, which is at a lower elevation, would still be drivable if 2 of those events, so 2 Hurricane Dianes, hit back to back in a 48-hour period. In that scenario, the school building would still be completely dry.
Thank you, Josh, for that analogy. I think we are understanding that our climate is changing and things are much wetter, and we're actually building and to adapt to that. We've made a lot of changes in how we do things in the city, including a very robust stormwater rules now. And the fact that also the parking lot is pervious surface, so that we're keeping a lot of the water on site, not in the school, but in the other wet areas. And it's also not always contributing to going into our stormwater drains, which can also be a problem with overflowing. So there's a lot of new technologies that we are using here. But we still are concerned about, the rains that are coming. And we did have that experience with with the library a few months back over the summer. And I think we realized we need to make sure that we're taking care of our ponds and dredging them more regularly so that water has someplace to go. I think that has something to do with that. But I appreciate the questions that have come
May I
up.
ask one quick thing? You said you're replacing, or the compensatory water storage was 1-to-1. I just wanted to know if that's been approved by the Conservation Committee. I recently put up a fence and went through extensive meetings with them, and I believe they made me remove more. I believe it was like 1.1 to 1 to put up my fence.
We will be meeting with the Conservation Commission. We've had some informal conversations with the agent, and we will have to go in front of the Conservation Commission. I believe in February is the plan, as we have the plan set a little further along. But we will be meeting with them, and we do have more storage than the actual 1-to-1. We are required to have 1-to-1, and we are providing more than that.
Okay. I just want to express my concerns because the flood zone goes into all of our properties. So if there's not enough room for it in the school, it goes to us.
Yeah. Well, the new school is going to be a big improvement over the old one, Caitlin. So that gives you any comfort in terms of displacement of stormwater. So I want to recognize Councillor, let's see, who had their hand up? Humphreys? Councillor Humphrey, did you have your hand up?
I took my hand down because I was going to just ask Commissioner Morse to read the Hurricane Diane paragraph from his memo. And just, again, like, I absolutely understand the concern, and this new proposal is a higher elevation, lower displacement school that moves away a school that was contributing significantly to the flooding problems and gives us the opportunity to do better flood mitigation closer to the brook because of the new location within the site of the new proposed school. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Humphrey. Not seen any. Oh, Councillor Kayla says your hand is up.
Yeah, so I'm going to motion to close the public hearing, but I'll just for the public that all attended, I have your addresses, so I'll stop by, introduce myself, and answer any questions that you might have.
Yes, this is just the beginning of quite a lot more deep discussion on this project. Thank you very much, Councillor Kalis. There's a motion to close the public hearing. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, so I believe there's 6 of us here tonight: Kelly, Leary, Kalis, Gentile, Norton, and Laredo. Okay. Okay, so public hearing is closed. If there's no more questions, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Councillor Leary?
Yes.
For the 558, you just need to verbally state that the committee is voting to approve the recommendations of the design review committee in the vote.
Okay. So we're voting to approve the design of the design review committee. That's the wording of the language that we have in front of us.
Yes, yeah, it just has to be verbally stated as well, to my knowledge, with the clerk's office today. Okay. So thank you.
Thank you. So all those in favor of the design review committee's recommendations, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Any nays? Okay, that is approved. Thank you very much. I'm gonna now
want to make sure you got my no.
Oh, I didn't get your no. Sorry. Thank
you.
Councillor Norton is a no. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to the Chair of Finance.
Thank you very much, Chair Leary. So item 360-23 is the authorization to borrow $74,730,950 for the construction of the school. Do we have comments or questions by councilors with respect to this element of the overall project and this particular docket item? Is there a motion in the Finance Committee on that item?
I'll put up a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilor Oliver. Is there any other discussion before we vote? Okay, one quick comment wanted to say, I guess beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I thought the designs looked really nice, and I thought the school looked very attractive. I'm sure you will incorporate the various comments you've received from the public as you move forward. While we have a really robust attendance tonight, I just want to say I'm so enthusiastic about building school buildings for our kids and continuing to march forward on the elementary buildings. I just want to implore us all to not lose sight of the fact that we still have a whole bunch of kids throughout the district that are in schools that are not gorgeous and gleaming and brand new. And we have a lot of work to do. Obviously we've had some other processes lately that have stalled in terms of moving forward on school buildings. And I just really hope that we don't lose sight of what our plan is going to be and our progress from here. That said, I'm so happy that the countryside community is that we're moving forward and providing a really top-notch facility, and that our kids and our teachers, our staff, our faculty will have a beautiful place to be every day. That said, do we have any further discussion in finance? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? We have one no. Any abstentions? Okay, I think we're 6 in favor, 1 opposed, 0 abstentions.
Okay, and I would entertain a motion to approve in public facilities on this item.
So moved.
Councillor Kalis has made a motion to approve. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Any nays?
No. What did we just vote on before? I thought we already voted in PF.
We're yeah, we voted on 353-23, which was the design review committee for their schematic design and site plan approval. And then we just approved, this was an authorization to borrow money for the construction of the countryside school, a rather large sum. So
okay. So I think we're all set on our first 2 docket items of the evening. Thank you so much to all who attended, and thank you for your tremendous efforts over what I'm sure was a very intense period of time to get to this point. You're of course all welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting, but no need. We're going to go on now to item 361-23. Her Honor, the Mayor requesting authorization to reduce the bond authorization for the Lincoln Elliott Elementary School project in the amount of $5,109,609. Commissioner Morse, can I turn it to you?
You may. So this is an interesting one. And this is rough. I can get very specific if we need to, but back in the spring of 2022, we established what we thought was a reasonable budget for the Lincoln Elliott School at $50 million. Shortly thereafter, the City Council approved $49.3 million to fully fund that $50 million project. And then subsequently in the summer of 2023, this past summer in June, I believe it was, we came before the City Council requesting to appropriate and expend the sum of $10 million of free cash to go towards the Lincoln Elliott project to reduce our principal and interest payments to help free up $600,000 a year, which went to the Newton Public Schools operating budget. Interestingly enough, when the City Council authorized that, there was no corresponding reduction in the original bond authorization. So what that means is that technically, the City Council authorized $60 million for the Lincoln Elliott School project. However, we are all people of integrity, and it was important that we came back to the City Council not only to inform you that the project, after the bids came in, total project budget was roughly $55 million, the exact numbers in the backup. So it came in about $6 million less than our estimate, which is good news. but it came in about $5 million more than our budget that we set in the spring of 2022, which is bad news. But it's less than what the city council authorized, which is good news. But in the interest of keeping everything above board and making sure you're completely aware, we wanted to make sure that we came in tonight to make you fully aware of the fact that $10 million of free cash is definitely still going towards paying for the design and construction of the Lincoln Elliott School, but also asking that we reduce the bond authorization so that we're not unnecessarily tying up those bonded dollars. And that's big picture. I'm happy. I know it's a little unique, a little strange. I'm happy to explain that. And I know Maureen Lemieux is here as well if there are any questions.
Ms. Lemieux, could you spend a second talking about how all of this works with the complicated financial picture we dealt with in the spring of essentially freeing up some of this money to supplement the operating budget for the schools? I mean, it sounds to me like essentially you should have been coming to us to ask for more money, but you don't have to because we made a procedural error in the spring. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, Councilor Grossman. So we initially, as the commissioner just said, we initially got authorization for, call it $50 million for the school. We then came to you, you authorized us to use $10 million as free cash to pay cash so that we could take that $600,000 that we otherwise would have been spending on debt service to increase the school department budget. Had we realized it at the time, we would have asked you, had I realized that it wasn't part of the board order, we would have had within the board order a motion for you to rescind $10 million worth of the authorization that you had given us. However, that wasn't part of the board order. Fast forward, we now know what Lincoln Elliott is going to cost us. So had we not come forward looking to use that 10 million, we would have been here asking you for 5 million more. Because we are using that 10 million and didn't reduce the board order, we have an extra 10 million sitting around. We only need, in theory, it's not really sitting around. We only need 5 million of it. The good news, and this whole story is good news, bad news. The good news is that we've realized, in April, May, June, it was becoming more and more clear as we were starting to get bids in with the environment that we are in, with inflation and supply chain issues and everything else. It became more and more clear to us that our estimate for Lincoln Elliott was going to be low. And so in my debt schedule that I put together, that you received as part of your long-range plan in September, I was already assuming at that point that Lincoln Elliott would probably cost us $55 million. So we've already baked this into our numbers in our long-range plan. And so this is really the housekeeping, if you will, to get what you have authorized back down to about what we expect to spend on the project. Otherwise, you would have authorized us to spend 5 million more than than the bids will require, than we ought to be spending, and certainly than we ought to be spending without your authorization, explicit authorization. So we wanted to be sure before we move forward that everybody understands that this is no longer a $50 million project. It's a $55 million project.
And you still have confidence that the $600,000 a year that was pledged to the operating budget of the schools remains affordable, intact, and doable, despite the fact that the $10 million didn't exactly go the way we talked about in the spring.
So I would say, yes, the $10 million is actually still going exactly how we had intended. we will be using that $10 million to pay cash. So we will bond $10 million less, whether it's this winter or depending on rates, we may even sell bands this year and not this year. But when we sell our next bond for Lincoln Elliott, it will be $10 million less than it otherwise would have been. That's what will generate that $600,000. So that is all still absolutely part of the plan. And so that was baked into all of our assumptions also. When we gave you the long range plan in September, that includes that $600,000 being added to the school department. So everything that we're doing tonight, we've baked into our long range plan. And everything is still being utilized the way we intended as far as the $10 million is concerned.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Oliver.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. I was just about to put my hand down for a minute because I wanted to go back up to the top of the 65-page packet. So I apologize while I formulate the wording of my question. But I think I just heard the answer in there. So earlier this afternoon, when I was trying to kind of talk my way through what was going on here, because if you look at that page 61 in our packet, and it's got the 54,198 and change, whatever it was for the total project, and then total allocated $60 million. I was like, wait, why are we at 60? So I'm coming up to speed really quickly here, but so I was about to ask, why aren't we putting the $5 million back into free cash? But you just answered that. We need the $10 million to offset or to lower the total bonds that we're issuing to generate the $600,000 in savings that we're putting directly into NPS.
Correct.
Thank goodness.
And you have.
I'm not going to. Oh, but please don't say anything else. You're going to confuse me. Brain is going to leak out my left ear here, my right ear here. I get it. I'm good. It's a fragile grasp on what we're doing here, but I think I have a grasp on it. Thank you.
Okay, we had a few other hands before, but they went down. Any other comments or questions from councilors? Do we have a motion in the Finance Committee on this item? Councilor Humphrey.
Approval.
Motion to approve by Councilor Humphrey. Any other discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I believe that's 7-0 on finance. Councilor Leary.
Thank you. I just want to say that I believe Councilor Danberg has joined us from the Public Facilities Committee. So could I get a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
From Councilor Kalis. Thank you very much. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any abstentions? Any nays? Okay. That's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. I think that covers it for the formal public facilities portion of the evening. Is that right, Councilor Leary?
That's correct. The last item is just for finance to vote on, I believe. 377, the debt service stabilization fund.
I will put that before us, and of course, you're all welcome to stay, and I hope many of you will. So 377-23 is Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to establish a debt service stabilization fund. And we have the details of this in our packet. It's obviously a closely related docket item to what we took up in recent weeks with respect to the operations stabilization fund that did not successfully go through the council. So Ms. Lemieux, let me turn this to you to introduce this, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will try to be very brief, given that most of us have been together for the 3.5 hours at this point. we are actually very fortunate. It may not feel that way all the time, but we are very fortunate that we are benefiting from $26 million of overlay surplus. Primarily this money is, or primarily because we had such significant increases in our interest income over the past year and a half, we have also benefited from higher than normal free cash. The fact that we have more free cash than normal is enabling us to do something special with our overlay surplus this year. We have the opportunity to turn these one-time funds into ongoing funds, which would allow us to free up pressure on our operating budget in order to direct additional funds to the Newton Public Schools while we still move forward, funding our pensions and continuing all of these tremendous capital projects that we've just had $125 million in front of you really this evening. None of this has changed. So even though we have a new item in front of all of you, the intent has always been to try to take this money, use it over the next several years, direct a large portion of this money to the Newton Public Schools. The vehicle that we have in front of you at this point has changed. We listened very intently to all of you in the last month or two. We have put effort into, and our comptroller, Steve Curley, is here with us. We have reached out to the state to make sure that we understand exactly what type of funds we could create to segregate this money if it is the will of the council. We cannot create just a reserve fund with a simple majority of the board. We do not have that latitude. We not only reached out to the state, Mr. Curley even contacted Dave Wilkinson, who I know we all have a tremendous amount of respect for, to see if he could remember what it was that the city did years ago when we set aside funds for Newton North, and whether or not he knew of anything that we could do. In the end, we have to either, if we want to take these funds and segregate them, we have to either set up a stabilization fund. The only other types of funds that we can create are like revolving funds or trust funds. These funds don't belong in any of those. And so what we are putting before you tonight is the creation of a debt service stabilization fund. This fund still requires 2/3 of the council to vote to establish it, and requires 2/3 of the vote, 2/3 of the council to vote to appropriate these funds. It only requires a simple majority to put money into the fund. That was true when we had the operations booster also. But I just want to make sure that everybody, so to establish it and to take money out of it still requires 2/3. It's still a stabilization fund that we are putting in front of you. So all of those conversations about can we change the purpose of the fund, all those conversations stay the same also. What is perhaps the greatest change in what we have put in front of you is we heard you loud and clear when you said, I don't know if it was a majority that felt this way, but certainly many of you felt that you did not want to tie the hands of future administrations or future city councils. That we heard loud and clear. And so if you look at what the draft council order that was in your packets, what it looks like, it does not, it says what the fund would be established for. It says clearly we would be coming and looking to take money out each year, but it does not specify any specific amount that would come out each year. There is no schedule attached to this, and there is nothing saying that a certain percentage would go to the schools and that the other amount would either go to city operations or to managing our gap. Okay, so that we heard loud and clear, and we really hope that this goes a long way toward meeting what I think many of you felt was something that you could not be comfortable with the language that we had. I certainly want to make it clear that although none of that is in this board order, as long as Mayor Fuller is mayor, which so we know that's the next two budgets, fiscals 25 and 26, will still be put together under her administration. It will be this mayor's intent to come forward with utilizing some of these funds that we will put toward it's a debt service stabilization fund. We'll take it as a general fund revenue. We will use some of these funds to reduce the monies that we need to a debt service, if you will, so that we can repurpose money for the Newton Public Schools. So the intent, I don't want anyone to think that our intent is different. It has always been to try to figure out how we free up pressure on the operating budget to support the Newton Public Schools going forward, particularly in these next 8 years, while we try to fully fund the pension system. All of that is still true, and I can guarantee you that the budget that the mayor would bring forward will have a greater than 3.5% appropriation for the school department in both 25 and 26. Beyond that, if whoever the mayor is moving forward, whether Mayor Fuller runs for another term and is successful, or whether someone else is the mayor, beginning in 27 on, would certainly have the latitude to do whatever they would want with this fund, obviously with a 2/3 vote of the council. So I am going to stop there. We have the draft order was in your packets. I think I've tried to make that clear with what we can do, what we can't do, and what our intent would be, at least for the next 2 years. And so, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back to you, and we can certainly begin this conversation.
Thank you. And I've got a few hands from counselors. I know that the school committee was introduced earlier on. I want to welcome you all again and thank you for coming tonight, as well as anyone who is here from the school department. And I've been asked by a few of you if we're going to accept comment from the school committee and the school administration, and of course. So if you have questions or comments or things that you want to add, please raise your hand and I'll be happy to recognize you in turn. Councillor Humphrey, then Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So because of the very clear and defined state rules on the use of stabilization funds and how they work, I do wish that we collectively had not gotten so hung up on stabilization funds being the mechanism to attempt to address the objective being to hopefully find a way of providing more long-term operational funding for the schools. Unfortunately, if the last plan was sort of trying to hammer a square peg into a round hole, this one is trying to do it on the ocean floor as well, right? It's even a layer further removed and more complicated in terms of trying to get funding to operations in the schools. Worse, it turns out that the previous proposal also really wouldn't have worked as advertised because of the mechanisms under the state rules, in the sense that we can't predefine the ways in which the money gets spent and how much they get spent each year, which is part of the reason why this version ends up being even vaguer than what we had previously heard. And the mechanism is particularly dangerous, I think, as we've seen from the example at Congress over the last 10 or 15 years at the federal level, which is that if you create these situations where there's constant opportunity for crisis in a vote to get money spent, then there's going to be a political crisis every single time. And I don't know why we would add that hoop for ourselves to jump through. Why would we set up a mechanism that requires a supermajority to create, but a simple majority to put money into, but then a supermajority to take money out of again, right? That sets up a situation where it really does not take very much effort to get a 1/3 +1 of the council to block spending every year if they don't like exactly how it's being spent or something like that. Moreover, I don't know how that would end up even being our job in the first place, because usually this is handled by the school committee. And I understand that this particular mechanic flows through the council rather than the school committee, but I'm saying this is just suddenly adding us into the negotiation process in a way that I don't think the school committee is that interested in, and we won't have that much ability to weigh in except through negative by voting no on it. So again, I think this is just setting us up for failure and crisis over and over again with a pretty low threshold to create that problem. So I don't really see that this proposal gets to the objective of providing additional operations funding long-term for the schools. I also do worry that it might, rather than helping resolve the ongoing contract talk situation by passing this might just not have anything to do with that except to antagonize the situation further, but that's more of just a side observation. I'm a lot more concerned about the mechanics of this, and I don't really think it did address the concerns that were raised by a majority of the city council on the last go around. Thank you.
Councilor Norton.
So I was comfortable with the previous proposal, and I do have some questions about this one, but in response to Councilor Humphrey's question, and I'm sorry that you're probably repeating yourself, but could you explain what problem that creating this mechanism solves, rather than just, leaving the money where it is and letting us spend it that way?
Well, right now, the money, if it is not put somewhere, put into a fund or something, it will drop to free cash next year. We will have we know that we need to increase our pension funding by more than 3.5% over the next several years. We know that we are continuing to build capital infrastructure, and so we have just finished with NECP. We are awaiting the bids for NewCal. You saw tonight that we know that we're going to spend an extra $5 million on Lincoln Elliott. We have Horace Mann that we don't have prices on yet and schematic designs, but that is also in the mix. All of those schools are, none of those are debt exclusions. And so we have capital projects we want to keep moving forward on. And this fund, by putting this money in this fund, it would enable us to take, much like our prior plan had thought, but this would enable us to take money out of the fund every year, put it to a debt service, and then that frees up some of the pressure on the operating budget so that we could increase the school department appropriation. Now, can we do it by using free cash? We can. However, it's not preferable to use large amounts of free cash. If we set this up with this as our specific intent, when we sit down with Moody's, this would be part of our strategy to use this money toward some of the tremendous investments that we are making. If we are using more free cash each year than our financial management guidelines, than our policy is in our financial management guidelines, it certainly is something that will be a flag for Moody's. Every year they ask us how much free cash we used toward our budget. I have been able to say every year, probably almost a decade now since we wrote those guidelines, that we are staying within our guidelines and using $1.5 million. If this money drops to free cash, and that's how we move forward for the next year or two, it will just make that conversation a little bit more difficult.
Okay. So my questions about this, which I plan to support, are you had said, Ms. Lemieux, a large portion would go for Newton Public Schools. Could you be more explicit on that? And my bias here as a mom, as someone who's been following the schools for a long time, since my blogging days, and who is excited about our new superintendent and would like to ensure that she has the runway that she needs to make investments, because I've been following things a bit more closely there as well. So how much money are we talking about? When are we talking about? And would there be an opportunity to front load some of that?
So unfortunately, I'm going to answer your last comment first. It would most probably not be our intent to front load it, because if we do, we are going to create a cliff for the school department. And so we would look at it more like ramping up again, so that we don't run out of money too soon without a different plan in place to supplement those funds. If we put let's say $5 million to the NPS budget for next year, there's only 26 million total in this fund. That 5 million, depending on what we were using it for, may very well compound over the next couple of years. So front loading it, if we don't have enough money in the fund, it will create the financial cliff. If we start at a lower level and build up, the goal would be to make it last until we have some other way to take care of the cliff.
Could I, is that, and I haven't watched every school committee meeting, is that a conversation with the school committee? I would have thought that there could be some expenses that are more one-time investments. I don't know.
So I'm going to be more than happy for the chair to turn it over to Dr. Nolan, but just so you know, we are also working with the school committee, the school administration, to talk about, because we still do have our free cash. So we are trying to figure out what we ought to utilize, how best to utilize our free cash. So some of those one-time projects, we will be coming to you with recommendations to use free cash, but I'm more than happy to turn it over to Dr. Nolan.
Dr. Nolan, do you want to weigh in at this time?
I certainly can and speak about the issues at hand if that's what you'd like to do. I don't want to take time from counselors getting their questions asked, but I had the same questions. We haven't really hammered it out deeply together. But I want to thank you all for your warm welcome, and I want to say that I understand the delicate balance that we have for a city financial ecosystem. And I know that the schools are just one part of it. So I want to say that, and I have lots of experience doing that dance over the years and dealing with the pandemic with my former town administrator and town meeting. But I do feel that the schools are a very important part of that financial ecosystem. And as you know, I've been hired to advocate for the schools. So I'm going to do that right here. And I'm going to be pretty passionate about it. I'm hired to love them and build them up into a stronger version of themselves. And in order to take on the next generation version of the Newton Public Schools, we're at a crossroads and a pretty significant transition time period. I just completed a significant audit of the school's programs, processes, and resources and routines. And I went through a rigorous process of cleaning up some issues in the human resources and side of things. And we have found efficiencies, cleaned those up and redeployed them. So using our own resources, we've been able to put forward more than we had hoped for before for a sustainable FY25 budget. But the crossroads that we're at, and mind you, I've just finished serving as the New England Superintendents Association president, and I'm now the Tri-County Superintendent Roundtable president. So I go to a lot of different districts and I do review their budgets with them. Newton has some fairly acute needs that I just need to make you aware of in order to upgrade its academic experience and its social emotional learning programs. At most acute at the elementary school in terms of support and intervention, early support and intervention, and at the high school in terms of massively outsized class sizes, particularly in STEM classes. Class sizes average 27 to 32 in those classes. And I want you to know there's been a lot of public discussion about dropping excellence in terms of where we are in the STEM areas for Newton. And I'm going to tell you that that's a big part of it. You can't possibly have class sizes of 32 and have children prepared in the way that they have been prepared when their class sizes were at 20 and 25. And similarly acute is the need for curriculum resources. So those are one-time resources. Many cities and towns capitalize the purchase of textbooks and curriculum resources. So there are some significant needs when you are meeting the wide range of needs with students with disabilities, and the multi-language learner program, which is now upwards, heading up to 1,000 students in the Newton schools. And they're all fully included in this district in general education classes, which is a complete celebration. But it does increase the complexity and the needs of the average classroom in order to have the range of materials and instructional resources to meet that complexity of these learning profiles. Particularly, we have to beef up the resources in STEM. So science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The options, the resources, and the materials for students to do real project-based science in the district are not here. And so I want you to know that those things are swirling in my head. And despite finding all those efficiencies, there's not enough efficiencies for us to address all of those types of needs and to do a good job with that. And we also need to fairly compensate the educators who have been toughing it out under these conditions with fewer and fewer support staff to address the needs of the students and the lack of curriculum resources. I know there are a lot of competing needs across the city, but I have to convey to you that for the Newton students, like the rest of the nation, this post-pandemic time period is pretty critical. And Newton did not fare as well as other districts in the region in terms of holding steady against the pandemic crisis academically. And we're not sure yet on the social emotional learning side. We've just begun to screen students systematically this year to determine the depth of those needs. The average increase post-pandemic for cities and towns around us in terms of their allocations and needs in order to meet these complexities has risen, or there's been increases in grant money or other additional resources brought to the table. And I fully intend to bring those types of resources. I haven't had the running room yet to get there. So in the last 2 years in my former district, we were able to write about $7 million worth of grants that we brought in. I'm suggesting some revenue resources to the school committee, but we just need a little bit more time there. So if this debt stabilization allows us to have more options to address the needs, I would advocate for it. But as already discussed tonight, it does not appear to guarantee any particular allocation that we can count on and that we can plan for. But I totally applaud the creative at-bats that Maureen and Mayor Fuller have been putting out here. And I know that they're trying, I think, to obtain additional resources for us. But the acute needs are now. To wait 5 years in order to be able to implement the types of interventions for our earliest learners doesn't make any sense. Those children will be launching into middle school. The cost of their interventions will grow, and we will be subjected to additional special ed costs and to additional outplacements. So I would like to advocate for some sort of manner of accelerating that funding, understanding the cliff, but understanding that that means we accelerate the actions that we take in order to avoid that cliff. 8 years is a long time for me to say that our elementary students can wait, and our high school students certainly can't wait. They'll be gone in 4. So I applaud this effort, and I thank Maureen for the creative revisions. But I need a little bit more detail about year-to-year information, how much each year, and to address these acute needs that are very clear to me have to be addressed immediately.
Ms. Lemieux, let me go back to you for a second, because I think what Dr. Nolan has just laid out and what Councillor Norton was asking is sort of the elephant in the room for a lot of us, which is how is NPS supposed to think about this? Like, what does this get them? And how can Dr. Nolan plan or know what to expect under this particular proposal?
So what I would say is that we have not really even begun to have our conversations about fiscal 25 and the fiscal 25 budget. Dr. Nolan is just putting the finishing touches on the analysis that she has done. We have not yet spent any credible amount of time discussing what the needs are that she has found in the district. So I would, it would be inappropriate tonight for me to say that we would be able to take this fund and fund these initiatives. Doesn't mean that the city wouldn't still move forward looking to try to fund some of these initiatives. That I could never make that promise sitting here tonight. What I can say is that if we establish this fund, it is absolutely the mayor's intent to help to supplement the funding that we have for the Newton Public Schools.
Madam Chair, can I just continue? So would we be able to, even if it wasn't now, even if it was passing this subject to second call, so if the votes are there, which I don't know if they are, would we be able to at least get, even if it was, even if it wasn't front loaded, even if, you know, even if it was the same allocation per year, could we get that number by the time we have our final vote, even aside from where the money would go? That, I think that would be a reasonable thing for us to know, is this, the expectations it would be this much amount of money starting this fiscal year and ending in this fiscal year.
I unfortunately, the problem with that is there are so many variables. We have the teacher contract that obviously the school committee is working hard trying to settle. So we have a huge variable there. We have different classrooms that I know that the schools, that the school department is looking to set up a couple of extra classrooms in addition to some of the initiatives that they've done over the last couple of years. We have these new initiatives that the superintendent is really focusing in on that are presumably, I'm certainly not doubting anything she says, probably incredibly important. I don't know which ones are the highest priorities for the school department.
And that's not what I'm asking. I'm just asking for how much money, if we
I don't think,
not where the money would go, just how much money it would be.
I don't think we can answer that. If I could answer, I would love to give you an answer. If I thought that that I could give you one that would make total sense. We are far. I think we are too far away from knowing what that answer could be. Certainly, in time for this to get passed, and that is the most honest I can be with you. Because I don't know how far we would want to push it. I don't think we would front load and have it decreasing. That I don't think would probably be wise on the city's part. Whether or not we figure it out and divide it by 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever the number of years is, I don't know if that's the right way for us to move forward. We still have so much that we need to figure out. So I honestly don't feel that I could give you a number and have you all make a decision based on that number. It will be too low for some of you if I were to make a guess now. It might be too high for others, but I don't think this isn't a case where I could just give you a number and say, this is what it will be. We have too many variables.
Okay, I see a lot of other people have hands, so I'm just going to end with a comment. When I spent about 4 years before I was elected going to all the school committee meetings, and Councilor Laredo remembers it fondly when I was in the audience blogging. And the very first meeting I went to, I want to say it was April 2010, and it was Jennifer Price, and her comment was that we were spending a lot of money on remediation in the high schools, and we could be saving a lot of money if we did a lot more investing at the earliest years. And so it sounds like that is still the case. I hope that we can find a way to do that in a timely manner. Thanks.
Councillor Gentile, then Kalis.
So I guess I want to start with some of the comments that my colleague and friend from Ward 2 just made. I don't think that she used the word reasonable, but I don't think it's reasonable to try and get the administration, and particularly, the mayor's office, to make a commitment in November, December, as to a additional allocation above and beyond what the schools normally get. I just don't think that that's fair. And I think it's wrong to try and get the administration to do that. We have a budget process, and we have it for a reason. Maybe what we need to do is to start a little bit earlier with the schools and maybe plan on some extra meetings with the schools so that we can understand better the needs that the superintendent was just explaining to us. I, for one, are very much interested in hearing that. When I was a member of the school committee, I felt strongly that it was my job, just as the superintendent was saying, to advocate for the schools. I didn't care about any other department in the city. I was on the school committee, and my job post 2.5 was to try and get as much money for the schools as I could. And that's what I did. But I've been on the city council now for a number of years, and I take it's equally important to me to keep in mind that there are a lot of different departments in the city that have a lot of needs. And I understand that the schools are one of them, but I just think it's unfair to try and come up with a number tonight, for something that typically happens well into the spring. So, but I look forward to the discussion. And I know that as Maureen already said, the first couple of years, we can expect that the money that we're going to save in the operating budget, because debt service will no longer have to come out of the operating budget the way that it has in the past. I expect that a good portion of that money will go to the schools. But to try and say now, percentages or whatever, or how much, I just don't think that's the responsible thing to do right now. So having said that, what I really want to speak to is the logistics and in setting up the fund that they have now. The last time this came up, Council Humphrey and I had a lot in common in the objections that we had to what had been proposed. But I see things a little bit different with this proposal that's in front of us. I think that it's a big improvement over what was proposed to us a couple of months ago. It does not restrict the way in which the money is used as much. It gives the flexibility that a lot of us talked about. It doesn't try to tie the hands of future administrations. For all of those reasons, I think, as I said, it's a big improvement. The only thing that I wish is to create maximum flexibility in the ability to move money. I wish that we could do it as some kind of a regular reserve fund, so that we don't get into, because I agree with what Councilor one thing Council Humphrey said, he is concerned about supermajority, and supermajority, and that's a concern that I have. I would rather, administrations only have to convince a majority of the council about, how to allocate a certain amount of money in a particular year. Now, I heard what Maureen said, and I'm sure that they have done their homework. I'm going to abstain tonight because I have been looking into this. I haven't gotten as far as I would like. I have some names that it was suggested that I speak with. I talked to our auditor about it, and I talked to another individual that's pretty good with municipal finance. And I just want to do a little bit more homework because I think that we would all be better served, especially the mayor's office, if you only had to get a majority vote on how to spend this money. The other thing that I'd like is I feel as though it gives the city council a seat at the table as to how, taxpayers' money, and especially this excess money, which is a good thing, is going to be spent. And that's something that I have been asking for and been pushing for. And I think that that's what this setup will allow us to do. So it's getting late. I just wanted to explain. I'll be abstaining tonight. I'm going to do a little bit more homework, hopefully get it all done before Monday. A little thing such as rezoning has taken up a lot of time for me and for the rest of us. So this got put on the back burner a little bit, but hopefully I'll get answers to the questions. And if I'm convinced that the only way of doing it is as a stabilization fund, then I will certainly support it. If I can get evidence to the otherwise, if there's any way of setting this up as a regular reserve fund that only needs a majority approval, then I will then also try to make the case. But either way, I see this as a big improvement.
Counselor, thank you. Counselor Kalis, then Oliver.
So I think Councillor Gentile really summed it up there. I couldn't agree more on all of his points. But the way that I'm looking at this is the big idea here is more money for the schools primarily. The mechanics are a problem. I agree. It's not optimal that we have to get a supermajority, but all that it will take is more communication. And I think, as Dr. Nolan just kind of outlined, she has some clear ideas of what she's looking for in the near term and in the long term. And I think, if there's one thing that we do well in government, it's talk. We have a lot of these meetings and we talk a lot. So maybe it's we add a couple meetings and the council is now more a part of some of these decisions. I think that's a good thing. And so I just think that they've come back, they've listened, they've improved on this, and I'll continue to support this. Thanks.
Counselor Oliver, then Laredo.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess at this point, 10:02 p.m., I do have a couple of questions, and I'll start with probably I hope, easiest one. Is there an urgency to this item?
Ms. Lemieux?
From the administration's perspective.
Well, for a couple of reasons, Councillor Oliver, we would like to get it established sooner rather than later, if we're going to establish it. One reason would be, as I mentioned, Moody's. We typically sell our bonds in January. And so we meet very, very early in January with Moody's for our ratings call. I don't know if we are going to look to do that this year or not. I plan on we'll be meeting with our financial advisor very soon, trying to figure out if it makes sense for the city to do that. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason, which I've said, but I know Councillor Gentile, and I don't disagree with him, has said we could always add another docket item while the money is certainly earning interest. But the interest goes to the general fund right now. We could certainly docket something that moves interest with the money if we wanted to. Personally, I would like to know that we had moved the money to a secure place.
Fair enough. And I think that, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. I concur with what I'm hearing from Councillor Gentile in terms of this is starting to feel like we're moving in a better direction from a certain perspective. And I think, we've already just identified a really big gap, which is, but okay, what are we going to actually do with it? And what I'm hearing is we're not ready to answer that question yet. So it's kind of a catch-22 scenario that we might have in front of us here. Because I think it's not just getting the money to the schools. It's getting the money to the schools, if that's what we're intending to do with some of this, in a timely fashion that allows Dr. Nolan to do her planning and to actually act on the entry plan that she just presented. And I also want to spend or allow Attorney Lee to just he and I spoke earlier today. He's here partially because I invited him here, so I apologize profusely for that, given that it's now 10:05. But I just kind of want to create a level set understanding of how we can set this up, because I want everyone to understand that, and I'm going to shut up and let Attorney Lee kind of talk this through, but we can't actually create a schedule ahead of time for how all of these funds are going to be allocated. And I just kind of want to make sure that not only I understand that, but we all hear it once together. And if I can turn it over, Madam Chair, to Attorney Lee to kind of walk us through a little bit of what we talked about earlier today.
Sure, Attorney Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, Councilor Oliver, no need to apologize. Finance Committee meetings are always thrilling, and I'm happy to be here. What I will say, though, I came on a little bit late for this particular docket item, but I heard CFO Lemieux explain kind of what the plan is for this particular stabilization fund. I think she did a great job. She made clear that there is not going to be any kind of binding schedule with regards to amounts, and then anything that happens to be freed up in the general fund because of this stabilization fund, if it was to actually be created, there's nothing that is binding in terms of the mayor and the city council for what those freed up monies would have to be used for. They'd be used up like any other general fund monies. It would have to go through the normal appropriations process. What I will say, though, is the stabilization fund, the way that they can be set up, it's a broad range. You can make it a very general purpose. You can make it a much more narrow purpose. I don't necessarily agree that you couldn't put parameters around how much in a year or things like that, but I think the understanding that the council needs to have is that would be perhaps an upper limit of what it is that can be done. For example, if you put there like the booster stabilization fund in terms of the percentages, right? That's the amount that you could do in a year, but not in the amount that you have to, because again, you have to have on an annual basis a 2/3 appropriation, 2/3 expenditure, or anytime money is taken out of the stabilization fund, you need a 2/3 vote of the city council. So it's a distinction, a minor one, but I think one worth mentioning.
Fabulous. I do appreciate that. I think it's also, in terms of moving this forward or what's in front of us tonight, it does seem to me that a motion to hold might be appropriate at some point in the near future here. It feels to me like there's more conversation to be had with Dr. Nolan helping to kind of figure out which way we might want to steer a little bit here, which I think might help some of the counselors here feel more comfortable about supporting this. But that's perhaps my perspective on this. I don't know how others feel about that. So from that perspective, thank you, Madam Chair. That's all from me for now. And I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Laredo, then Maliki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, I'll start off by saying that I think we all have a common goal here, which is to try to do the best thing we can for our school system. And I appreciate that the administration is trying to do that. Here's my perspective and frankly dilemma with what's being presented. Number one, I do not see the rush, period. There is no timetable that I'm aware of that compels us to make a decision this week or next week or the week after. And the fact that this was presented as a late filed item just before the Thanksgiving holiday, we're taking it up 2 days later, and the city council, as we all know, is embroiled in the zoning work plus all our other year-end activities. This is not something, frankly, that has to be decided in December. It just doesn't. Second, and perhaps more compelling, is I listened very carefully to what Dr. Nolan had to say. I've read excerpts of her report. I am, as a former school committee person, I'm thrilled that she is willing to get out there in front, talk about weaknesses and places for improvement in the system, and doing it in a very candid manner. And I respect a great deal the difference and the difference of roles between the school committee and the city council. And I think before we start talking about how we spend this money, let's hear from the superintendent and the school committee what their goals are. Do they need an immediate infusion of funds this year or next year beyond what is anticipated with the stabilization fund? If they make a compelling case for that, maybe we do that. In other words, I think it's a mistake to lock us in when Dr. Nolan is identifying real needs of the system that need to be addressed now and can't wait 3, 4, 5, 6 years, at least for the students who are currently in the system. So I think that's the starting point. The other piece I'm struggling with is, Ms. Lemieux, we could put all this money and leave it in free cash. There is nothing to prevent us from doing so. We can move any interest we earn over to free cash. The only constraint I hear you saying is when you go to the bonding services, they don't like to see that much free cash. And my response to that is, that's simple. You explain to them that rather than creating a separate stabilization fund, we've kept it in free cash. That's our plan. I'm not privy to your discussions with the bonding companies, but I don't see that as any impediment whatsoever, at least from my perspective. And so I'm not opposed to the idea of some kind of fund, but I think we really need to hear from the school system first. And I do still have concerns. I think Councilor Humphrey identified those earlier, of this idea that we need 2/3 of a vote to release the funds. That could be a real impediment down the road if there's a need for funds at a different pace than you're anticipating. So I'll leave it at that. I'm not on the committee, so I don't get to vote tonight. And again, I think everyone's very well intentioned here. It's the mechanism we do this that I think is critical. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Maliki, and then I want to come back to Dr. Nolan, school committee member Bresky, and Councilor Gentile. I see you want to speak again as well. Councilor Maliki.
Right. I think I can be pretty short because the last couple of comments sort of were along what I'm thinking. It seems like Dr. Nolan has done this study, has a plan, and hasn't had an opportunity yet to discuss it with the administration. So it seems like setting up this fund before that happens is sort of backwards and not necessary. I was wondering if Ms. Lemieux could elaborate on what I thought I heard earlier, that Moody's does not like too much or a certain amount, or I don't know if it was an absolute amount or a percentage in free cash or to be used in free cash. And I guess I have trouble understanding that.
Just quickly, the comment I made was, no, they love it if we have a lot of free cash. So I don't want anyone to think that they don't like free cash. They love free cash. What they don't like is for us to use our free cash to fund next year's budget. That's where their issues are. Not that we have a lot of free cash. We absolutely can let it drop to free cash. It's that if we're using free cash as a way to supplement our operating needs, it's the whole notion of using one-time funds.
Okay, so I guess then I don't see the problem with leaving it there temporarily while we figure out what we want to do to help Dr. Nolan. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Nolan.
Just a public service announcement. I've been working with Carol, your assistant, to arrange a time for us to come together, City Council and School Committee, on December 19th, 6 p.m. To have that deep dive conversation on entry plan findings. And I promise I'll have good snacks so that you can all join me and we can have that collaborative conversation. I'm just waiting to hear back from Carol that that's a go, but those were like 3 of your nights that there were no other meetings scheduled. So I hope you can join us for that meeting.
Thank you. School Committee Member Bresky.
Thank you. So I guess I just want to respond quickly to a couple things I heard this evening. From my perspective, there's 2 issues here. There's the mechanics of how this thing works and the logistics, and I don't have a tremendously informed view on that. And then there's the needs of the school system. And to Dr. Nolan's point, those needs are real and they're present, and they are not 5 years in the future. To address Councilor Laredo, it's not an infusion we need next year. It's an infusion we actually needed last year and the year before that, as we made cuts that we didn't want to make. And now we are trying to play catch up on that. And what's happening in our school system, and we're not unique in this, but what's happening in our school system is it's a different ballgame than 5 years ago, than pre-pandemic. It is just not the same thing. They're not comparable time periods. And how did we get there? I mean, it was happening slowly, and then it happened really quickly. And it happened quickly not for the sake of our kids, but for the sake of adults. And to say that we're going to, sit back and fix that problem in 5 years doesn't feel like an appropriate solution to me. So in terms of thinking about the mechanics of how we get what we need for our students and for our staff, I'm a bit indifferent as to how we get it, and I'm more concerned that we get what we need. And for the first time in certainly my time involved in the school committee, whether on it or as a parent, I'm hearing from Dr. Nolan a real assessment of what we need, not based on what we're given, but what we need. And I think that's a really important shift in how this is being presented. So I don't think, there's a piece of this that says, well, we take this money over 8 years and, that's not economically illogical. I understand the concept behind that, but that doesn't address the very acute needs we have today. And so if we think about this money over a shorter time period, I think that's up to the administration and the school committee to underwrite the risk of doing so, and to think about, you know, the efficiencies that we might be able to uncover in the system, to think about other sources of revenue, to advocate for, you know, increased allocations, to, you know, there might be a need for an override 5 years down the road to fill that tail end of this. All those things are sort of on the menu of how you go about thinking about that. But, you know, to think about this in a, you know, we just have to do the most fiscally prudent thing doesn't address the needs of our kids and our staff today. And those needs are real and acute. So I just want to make that point very clear to everybody. And again, I mean, in terms of the mechanism, give us the money any way you want to give us the money, so long as we get what we need for our kids and our staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gentile, then School Committee Member Levy.
So, Dr. Nolan, did I hear you say something about a possible meeting in December?
Yes, I'm just waiting to firm that up with Carol.
Well, I appreciate the thought, but I don't know how other colleagues feel, but the last thing I want is another meeting in December. I don't know if you've been following us and our little rezoning issue that we have, but I think everybody is pretty beat at this point. And I would ask that, you know, we have a conversation about that, because, for instance, I mean, I have a daughter that comes into town not very often. She lives way out west, and she's coming in. She's not here for very long. And the last thing I wanted to do is go to another city meeting on December the 19th. So please, let's think about that a little bit. Plus, we have some changeover that's happening that in January, and I would think that it would be good if those folks could also, you know, participate in any kind of a gathering. So, but I raised my hand originally because I just want to talk about the timing. I feel, as Councilor Oliver and Laredo alluded to, this thing got rushed again at a bad time when we're trying to get this rezoning done. So if people want to hold it, I said I was prepared to abstain tonight while I did a little bit more homework. But if people feel as though they need more time, I certainly understand why, because I don't know why it had to be late filed. I don't know why it had to come up right away, especially with everything else that is going on. Now, that's not to say that we have unlimited time. It would be a huge mistake to allow this money to drop to free cash. But, you know, that's not going to happen for quite some time. So, you know, it doesn't have to be done now. We can, you know, figure this out in January, and something has to be done with the money, and we don't have a lot of choices. So if you don't like it going into this particular stabilization fund, then come up with a different idea, because I don't know where else it can go. But I'll tell you, letting it fall to free cash is not a good idea. And I want to make one final point. I can't agree more strongly with Maureen that the last thing rating agencies or that good financial practices would suggest is using a significant amount of free cash to supplement your operating budget. That is a huge red flag, which is why mayors for the last number of years have been very careful to supplement our operating budget with only a certain amount of free cash. So please, we don't want to find ourselves in the position that in order to get the money, to the schools or anywhere else using a lot of free cash. I heard what Councilor Rado say, well, you can just explain it. I've been to several of those meetings with the rating agencies, and they're a little, they could be sticks in the mud, if you know what I mean. They have a hard time just understanding when you explain things to them. They look at something and say, you're spending X amount of dollars on, free cash on your operating budget. That is not a good idea. And all the explaining in the world isn't going to help when they decide, to give you your rating. So we got to get it done, certainly before this fiscal year is out, but we still have time if people want a little more time to get this done in January. Thanks.
Thank you. School Committee Member Levy.
Thank you, Chair Grossman. I want to follow on a little bit from what Chris Bresky was saying. First, I also want to say that those of us who are appearing here from the school committee are doing it as individual members on this topic, because this has not been a docketed item in front of the school committee, this particular proposal. And so there is no official school committee position on this issue as of this time, but we all have our individual opinions. When Anna Nolan was brought in as superintendent, she said to us that she was going to spend her first several months preparing an entry plan that would give her assessment of the status of the school system. And unlike any document I've seen over the years, and I've been living in the city for over 40 years, with regard to the public schools, I have never seen such a comprehensive audit and assessment, pointing out the good and the bad and the ugly of our system. And among the things it shows, even this preliminary assessment after just a few months, is that there are very real short-term, one-time needs that our children and teachers are facing. We have a deferred maintenance budget of millions of dollars because of a lack of funding of maintenance over the last 10 years. We have curriculum materials that are out of date and are not standardized. We've just started an early childhood literacy program, and with the help of the mayor, are investing $2 million in that. But everybody recognizes that even that will be insufficient as a one-time expenditure to fully implement that program. We have mental health needs coming out of COVID that are essentially one-time occurrences that need to be addressed. So I would just urge you, and it's totally at your discretion, of course, how to use these and other funds. I would urge you to give a great deal of credence to the use of these surplus funds for some very important and timely one-time investments in the system. Now, over time, also, we're all going to be looking together at, and I hope we do it together because I think there's power in those discussions. We're going to be looking at what level of ongoing funding will be necessary to deliver the quality of the schools that our community expects. And whether you do it in a vehicle like this that basically turns a one-time cash infusion into a longer-term ongoing allocation, or whether you do it through the regular allocation through the city budget is in the hands of the administration and you. And our commitment, or my commitment, working with Anna and my colleagues, is to try to give you a rigorous thoughtful approach to how we restore the school system to where it should be, where the people of the city expect it to be, and where they deserve it to be, frankly. So thank you for your attention to this, and thank you for inviting us tonight.
Thank you. Dr. Nolan.
I just wanted to reassure Councillor Gentile that if this is, I felt urgent need to schedule this now in December because I wanted you to be able to make a decision on this with some things in mind. If that's not a rush, then I certainly don't need another December meeting either. So flexible, but if you want to put it in wet cement in your calendar, I'll get back to you within a day.
Dr. Nolan, can I just ask you to address, I mean, you were just talking about timing and the timing of this. I want to make sure I'm understanding. From your perspective, is there urgency to this item now in December? Because I think, you know, we're hearing a different level of urgency from the mayor's office side of things. That urgency is not coming through right now from what I'm hearing from the school side of things. And I want to know if I'm missing the bigger picture here.
So, I mean, we have some very real pressures right now with the contract negotiations. And so I appreciate Maureen and the mayor's urgency, because I think we're all trying to get things in a place where we can make some solid decisions about that. So I appreciate that. But also the mechanism of it, you know, as Maureen said, we're not quite there on how it's going to be executed. So I feel nervous about you not having the knowledge of the very real demands that we have in addition to the contract negotiations, because it can't be that, you know, we can settle a contract, but we can't make any improvements for the lives of the kids. And so I need everybody to have the full portfolio and scope of the demand in our minds as we're making these decisions. I just wanted you to have as much information as possible as you make these decisions. If this is not occurring right now, then I don't have to push it, but we do have to settle our contract, and we're trying to understand what are all the resources available to us as we have this conversation right now, and we try to settle this contract.
All right. So that's essentially what I'm driving at. And if I'm sort of getting into a subject matter that is not appropriate for the setting, somebody let me know, because I'm not as well versed in where the lines are around these things. But is it important to you and those of you involved in the contract negotiations and where we are to have clarity on this money soon, as in it needs to go to the full council pretty much immediately, or no?
So I'm in a weird spot because I cannot speak for the full school committee, who has not taken a voted position on this matter. So I think that we're in this dynamic of wanting to address it and wanting to accept any funds possible that will help the situation, but not knowing if this is the only mechanism for that. But I see my school committee colleagues' hands up, and I'm sure they want to weigh in.
Okay. Councilors Oliver and Humphrey, would you mind deferring a second so we can hear from some of the school committee members? Just not if that's...
I was only going to comment on the calendar.
But
and I was only going to motion hold.
Right. Well, but before what I'm driving at is to get to that point. I want to understand.
Well, I was just going to say the 19th would be after the last day this would be voted on anyway, so that wouldn't, like, if that meeting is meant to inform this, that won't do that, regardless of when we vote this.
In this calendar year.
Right.
Well, I'm saying in this term with this docket item, because it's going to expire at the end of the year.
Yes.
There were no other earlier free nights, unfortunately.
Right. Okay.
Which I think was Lenny's point. Yes.
Well, let's hear from our school committee members, and then Councilor Oliver. I will come back to you. Of course, any motion you want to make is in order. School committee member Parlikar.
So if Kathy Shields is actually responding to the question that was asked to Dr. Nolan, I will defer to Kathy to respond to that and can then bring up the point I was planning to bring up. Please, Kathy.
Thank you, Chair Grossman. I was planning to respond to the question you asked and that sort of Anna punted to the school committee members. And I think I want to say that I'm speaking only as myself. I am not speaking on behalf of the committee because I don't know that this is something, we haven't discussed this precise question, but I think it is fair to say that in the context of contract negotiations, in making any offer that we make, we need to have as much clarity as possible into what our budget is like, not only for the current fiscal year, but for the succeeding 3 years, because that is the term of a contract that we are negotiating. And so I think having clarity as soon as possible into what sums may be available through the school committee will greatly help us come to a fair negotiating position. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, thank you. School committee member Shen.
Thank you, Chair Grossman. I think my colleagues made a very eloquent statement and argument for the urgency of this decision. And I also heard pretty loud and clear from the council members that December is difficult time and you have your rezoning issue. I understand that, but I also hope you guys understand the union contract negotiation issue is very, very heavy on us. And I think quite a few of us probably lost some sleep now because we heard parents, send letters, call us, probably 100 calls to my cell phone and arguing for how to, get this done. And this is very time consuming, and also for superintendent, we all understand she has a lot of things on her plate. And we got this entry plan, which talk about all those things we need to do as soon as possible. And Paul and Chris all mentioned that, as Dr. Nolan mentioned, the challenges we have. Beside the union contract issue, the high school STEM classes, the elementary school, and the curriculum issues, these need to be addressed very soon. But planning takes time. And I think, as Cassie mentioned, that if we don't have the clarity, it's hard for Dr. Nolan to make any plan for us to move ahead. So we really appreciate, even though we know the timing probably not the best, but these issues really heavy not on us, but on the community, on all stakeholders, parents, students, and as school committee, those students came to our meeting and lecture us how to run our school committee. And that was humbling experience sitting there, listen to those high school students teach us how to do our job. And I think I'm willing to make some sacrifice, during the holiday season. I know it's difficult. I appreciate that. We need some family time, but I think this is more important, unfortunately, for our, city and community policymakers to make a little bit sacrifice to get this done, and hopefully, so we as school committee and Dr. Nolan knows how we can move ahead, as Cassie just mentioned, because this contract issue, no one like to hear the word strike, and that will be huge disruptive to our school system and to our students' learning. So we appreciate that you are being very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. School committee member Parlikar.
Thank you. I'd like to take just a minute to expand a little bit on what Chris and Paul said in terms of our needs as a school system. Right? We have real needs. We are in a situation where there has been underinvestment in a number of areas, certainly in facilities, and we've had growing expenses due to the contracts that have just expired, due to academic improvements we've made without the matching investments in or additions to our operating budget. And we got hit by the pandemic, which left our students in a tougher academic situation, a much tougher mental health and social emotional situation. And to be frank, we had ARPA funds that were available to the city, and we didn't use them in the way we should have. Right? We're looking at significant caseloads for our guidance counselors, for our school adjustment counselors. Could ARPA funds have been used at some point to provide a 5-year bridge to support our students? Yes. Did we do that? No. In the last 2 years, what we've done as a school committee is cut positions. So we now have larger classes than we had at the beginning, than we had 2 years ago at the high school level. We have fewer teachers than we had 2 years ago. It's actually quite dispiriting being on the school committee and seeing the impact that our budget decisions are having on the schools. So there are many reasons why we are where we are, but I can assure you, having looked at this very thoughtfully, and my fellow school committee members have as well, the needs are real. Setting aside the contract and the contract negotiations, which others have spoken about, there are many needs that we do have. Some of them are quite urgent in the sense of, if we don't fix what's happening with high school class sizes this year or leading into next year, we're putting students in a situation where they're going to get through high school and be in AP classes that are way too large, or college prep classes that are way too large, or support classes that are way too large. So the needs are there. We are in this situation due to a variety of decisions made by the mayor, by the city council, by previous school committees, and very much by us in the last 2 budget cycles. And we need to break out of this. Is the answer this approach of a stabilization fund? Possibly. But also in terms of timing, it doesn't necessarily get us funding that would be useful and applied very, very thoughtfully and specifically in the time frame in which it should be applied. So thank you.
Thank you. School committee member Levy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to supplement Kathy Shields' comments about the union negotiation. I served with her and Tomiko Oshesky on the negotiating committee. And I agree with Kathy that it would be very helpful for us to know with greater precision what funds might be available from various mechanisms that the mayor and the council would propose. But I just want to point out that in this very meeting, we heard over and over that it is not possible to specify the amount of funds or the timing of funds that would be available to the school department from this mechanism. So we cannot count on it in the current negotiation. We could take a risk in that negotiation that it might be available according to a certain pattern, but we don't have that pattern. And if we took that risk and we were wrong, in other words, that the money did not show up according to the pattern that we wrote into a contract, because that contract would be legally binding on us, we would have to find other sources of money to pay for that contract. So as currently presented to you, based on what I'm hearing tonight, I don't see how I personally could take it into account in terms of the negotiation. Thank you.
President Albright, we haven't heard from you yet, so let me recognize you next. Then Councilor Humphrey, I'm going to come to you. Ms. Lemieux, I have another question out of all this for you. President Albright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So from what we've been hearing, the need is great for both one-time and ongoing costs. And school committee member Levy, you talked about deferred maintenance hasn't been appropriate for the last 10 years. I haven't been on the school committee for 20 years, and that was an issue when I was on the school committee. So that goes way back as a problem. It sounds to me like the longer the school committee goes without clarity on funding, the more difficult it is for the school committee, the teachers, the administration, and the kids. This feels like it's really important. And two suggestions. One is Maureen, is there any way for you and the mayor to clarify with much greater clarity exactly what the funding mechanism is and how much it means and how you would do it? I think everyone here could be served well by more clarity there. And I don't expect you to have it tonight, but if there could be more clarity at another meeting, that would be extremely useful. I've been looking at the calendar, and there is a meeting that we have reserved for zoning on December 14th, that it is my firm desire and hope and even expectation that we won't need that meeting for the zoning. We may even finish tomorrow night, who knows, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. So it feels like there could be a meeting of the school committee and the council on the 14th, and even finance could meet that same night and still have a decision in time for the 18th, which is our last meeting. You know, putting it off until January, yeah, you can do that. Putting it off until the end of the fiscal year before it drops to free cash, yeah, you can do that. But I don't think that really helps anybody. So I ask for two things: clarity from the administration on how much money and for how many years, and also the possibility of us all meeting again on the 14th.
Okay, Ms. Lemieux, do you want to answer those two things?
I can certainly speak with the mayor tomorrow and figure out what our response would be. I have to say, I think it is premature. I think it's a very difficult conversation. What we put in front of you 2 months ago had a sense of where we really, at least where we thought we ought to go with this fund. People didn't want to have hands tied. And so we've come back with this, which I think was responding to a lot of what we heard. For us to now try to come back with what would it look like, I'm not quite sure. I mean, that's not what we have or how we've written this one. This one gives the latitude to the next administration. All this mayor can do is say what she would do in the 25 and 26 budgets. And I think it's really, it's premature. We haven't had time to meet with Dr. Nolan. The school committee hasn't had time. It's still November. For us to figure out what we're really putting in front of you for next spring, we can't do that. Could we give you a floor of, what would the lowest amount be that we would recommend using toward next year's budget? I think we can do that. I think I even can be safe saying it would be at least as much when we came forward 2 months ago with our plan. We had projected that we would use $660,000 in FY25. We had 70% of that, or $462, going to the school department. I can say to you, I can't imagine that we would be proposing something less for next year's budget. I cannot imagine we would be proposing something less. But as I think you're hearing, There's a lot of, there is, again, as I said, so many variables. There is anxiety on the school committee's part, I think, because they're trying to accomplish so many things. I don't know that we can actually, I don't know that we can give you what you're asking for. I think all we can, at this point, we can move the money or not. I think not. I think there is urgency in moving it. I think it does give the school committee at least some sense of knowing that this money is set aside. I absolutely believe that. We wouldn't be back here having this conversation again. We wouldn't have late filed it if we thought that that it would make sense to wait until January or February to do this. Realistically, it would be February if we probably the earliest. We are going to docket some things for your January 1st meeting. I don't think we would be redocketing this because I think we would need to have conversations about what a new docket item ought to look like. So I think realistically, if we don't finish this and decide one way or the other in December, I think it's at least February before the school committee gets an answer on whether or not we're going to create this fund. I don't think it's the answer that you want to hear, and I apologize, but I don't think I can give you the answer that you want to hear.
So can I ask Dr. Nolan or maybe Kathy Shields, since she answered the question, with knowing that the money is set aside without knowing exactly how much there's going to be each year, does that help you any or not at all?
School committee member Shields.
Hey, Councillor Albright, I think that's a challenging question to answer. It may be that school committee member Levy and I disagree on this point slightly. I think it would be helpful to know that the money is there, even without knowing how much we would get in any year. Because I think it helps us evaluate likelihoods. I mean, when you're talking about budget several years out in the future, which is part of the exercise that we do when we negotiate contracts, we need to be making certain assumptions about what is going to happen in years beyond the budget that we have in front of us. And I think the more information we have about what our sources of revenue might be, the better. Clearly, more precision is better, but I think there is value to simply knowing one way or another that the funds will be available or not. It would clearly be helpful the more detail we had, but I don't know that we're going to get that level of detail given the current proposal. And that's my view. Thank you.
Okay, let me go to Councillor Humphrey, who's been waiting patiently. School committee member Bresky, I want to let you weigh in on this timing question too. We've then got Councillors Kalis and Gentile's hands up as well. Councillor Humphrey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I wanted to comment on some of the anxieties we're hearing from my perspective. So I also want more funds to go to NPS, and I especially want them to be upfront to address the urgent short-term needs. I also want the contract to be resolved. This proposal on the table before us does not address or help with any of those things. This proposed mechanism legally includes no clarity either way. It can't include clarity on available funds to NPS. That's also, by the way, true of the previous plan. That was not well represented to us at the time, but the stipulations on how much money would be used each year, that's actually not allowed to be planned for in that way, as it was suggested. This is a debt stabilization fund. So what we're talking about with regard to schools or anything, that's purely hypothetical. Yes, they're saying this is how they would use those savings, but there's actually nothing in this mechanism that would make that be true, that somehow savings would be freed up and then we would get to use those on NPS operations. So that's what we're voting on right now. We're not voting on school operations money. We're voting on debt service stabilization money as a potential fund set aside. And then we're going to have to vote each year on how much to set aside for debt service out of this particular fund. Now, if you want clarity in terms of setting aside some money to have for the contract, this doesn't do that. And if for whatever reason you wanted to have clarity on setting aside money not to have available for the contract, this also doesn't do that, because that's not how this legally works, and that can still be considered for the purposes of negotiation. So what we're actually voting on, if we're voting on this, is debt service stabilization fund, and that's the only thing. It's really not about the other stuff, and it doesn't give you clarity on those things, unfortunately. I wish it did, but it doesn't. So I just want to say that I don't think we're going to get clarity before the end of this council term on that point. I'm sorry to say. I wish that's not how it had shaken out, but that's how it did. So I'll leave it at that and move hold as suggested by Councillor Oliver. But, I think the hour is late and we're going to need to have more discussions, I guess. But again, this is not going to address those anxieties or help resolve those outstanding issues. Thank you.
School Committee Member Bresky, Councillor Kalis, you took your hand down, so I don't know if that was a mistake, but otherwise to Councillor Gentile.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to respond very acutely to Councillor Albright's question. There's from my perspective, there's no greater or less certainty or uncertainty between this plan, which will have an uncertain allocation that will ultimately come from whoever the mayor is throughout the course of time it exists, that will be voted on as a city council, just as it would for free cash. So as sort of the two theoretical possibilities that have been put out there tonight, from a certainty perspective, there's no difference.
Okay. Councillor Gentile.
Well, I hadn't planned on again speaking, but I wasn't prepared for this meeting either, and I don't understand what people are looking for. I hope that everyone understands the money's available now. I mean, it's sitting in the bank. $26 million is sitting in the bank. It's already been declared overlay surplus, and it's earning 5.3% interest. Nice and healthy, $1,300,000 a year in interest alone. So there's money there. But I also think that it's unrealistic for a mayor in November to tell you how much extra money you're going to get. So I really don't understand what we're being asked. And since everybody's, got all these ideas and are offering, timetables and so forth, there's nothing more devastating to a school department than what you're going through now in work to rule. In my 8 years on the school committee, that was the worst period of time and the lousiest time to be a member of the school committee, and all the stuff that goes on and the conflicts that staff has, the shortcomings that kids have. So let me give you a piece of advice. Get into a room and don't leave the room until the contract is settled. And once the contract is settled, I think there'll be more clarity, and the mayor's office and the council can start to work collaboratively with you to give you the money that you need. But rather than, I want to make sure everybody understands there's plenty of money around. So let's get the contract settled, and then we'll figure things out from there.
Okay, we have a motion to hold on the table. We can take a vote on that in a second. I don't know if anybody else has comments. Personally, I'm going to vote no on hold. And the reason I'm voting no is that what I'm hearing here, and what I think I've been hearing over the last few months, is that the administration needs to understand if a mechanism. Obviously, the last attempted mechanism didn't work. Now we have this mechanism is a vehicle that they can use to structure some cash flows to help out the school system. And obviously, you all know I spoke really clearly. I mean, I want every dollar that we can get to help and educate the kids to get to the kids. And I get that this mechanism is uncertain, and yet I don't know. I can't help but sort of listen to us talk in circles, because the last time around everybody did not like that it was so certain, and this time around everybody doesn't like that it's not certain. So I think my feeling on this is, let's find out if there's an appetite of the city council to have this type of a mechanism, or there's not this type of a mechanism. And unfortunately, Councillor Gentile, I totally understand what you're saying, but we're also stuck with the reality that the mayor is willing to allocate money in certain ways. And we've all been working with Mayor Fuller for a long time now and know how she thinks and how she budgets and how she likes to match timing and cash flows and all those things. So personally, I think we should just figure out if there's an appetite on the council or not. And I don't want to hold it. Any other comments? Councillor Kalis.
I tend to agree. And Ms. Lemieux, the only thing I'd go back and confer with the mayor on is, can you reduce the 8 years to 4 or 5 years, so it brings it to be more certain, and the money could actually be front loaded or something like that.
So, if I may, Madam Chair, I actually said earlier tonight that we don't know what the schedule is. In fact, I think I said, if you recall, maybe it's 5, 6, 7 years. I don't know. We don't have anything in here that stipulates that. So, whereas the other one, we had put together a schedule. We said that we expected the fund to be depleted in 8 years. I mean, we were very clear with what our plan was on the last one. That's why I say I think you could expect that we would not go less than 660 in total, not less than 460 for the schools. I don't know where we are going to go. What I don't think we would do is start high and then have to reduce the amount each year, unless we were starting high, doing that as one-time things. So until we have time to really work through all of these different things, we can't give you an answer on that. But I can assure you that the intent would be to be working with the schools, because the school committee, as each of the school committee members have said, the school committee hasn't resolved the contract. I don't know, as a committee, if they are on the same page yet with what they want to offer as COLAs, so I can't be answering some questions when the school committee hasn't been able to fully decide what it is that they want to do.
Right, but Ms. Lemieux, here's the problem. Half the conversation we're talking about urgency and the late filed item in December, and the other part of the conversation we're talking about, but we haven't had time. So, and herein lies the vote.
But we are not going to be able to tell you tonight how much money we would be putting into the budget from this fund for next year. Nor can I tell you exactly what the budget will be next year. It's too far away. We're only, 4 or 5 months into this fiscal year. It's 7 months before next fiscal year starts. It's an eternity in a sense. It's an instant, but it's also an eternity when you look at interest rates and interest income and the markets and what's happening. So I just don't know how we're going to be able to answer this. Do I have a sense of urgency? The answer is definitely yes. I think we will all be better off if we have put this money in a fund knowing that it's there. And do I know how much the mayor will want to put toward next year's budget? That I'm not going to be able to answer for too long. I mean, that'll take us a couple of months to ever get to. But knowing that we've set it aside, the money is there, I think helps many people on this screen be able to move forward with decisions. So for me, there is absolutely a sense of urgency.
Okay. President Albright, and then let's see if we can vote.
Okay, so just to respond one thing to something that school committee member Bresky said, maybe I misinterpreted, but I think based on what I heard Maureen and Councillor Gentile say, leaving it as free cash and letting it roll over to free cash and then using it out of free cash to the operating budget is not a good idea. So I don't think that's an option, because that's going to look bad to the bonding authorities. Like Moody's. We would be using too much free cash in our operating budget. But I might have misunderstood what you were saying. But so Maureen, let me ask you this question: what did you envision as the process going forward to make the determination of how, when, and how much to get to the school committee? What did you foresee as the process if this was approved by the council?
I think we've had a few different concepts, if you will, as time has gone on. So this money was declared in August. Initially, we laid out that schedule that was going to start at the $660,000 in year one. It was going to escalate to 7.8 million by year 8. It was designed to grow throughout the 8 years. That was now more than 3 months ago. The superintendent hadn't done her entry plan yet. We hadn't even had conversations with the school administration, me being Liam and Sean. And even when I look at their projections for next year, there are things that I know that the schools are going to want to do that are not part of those numbers. So we still, as I say, we have a lot of work to do. What our plan was in August is not necessarily what our plan would be now. But I don't know what the plan, I can't tell you what the amount would be now.
No, I understand that. But so what you're asking for is permission to put the money aside. And then I guess there would be a process by which you would work with Dr. Nolan and the school committee to decide how much and when.
Yes. All we're looking at this point is to put the money in a fund.
Okay.
Councilor Kalis?
To Susan's point, there's a lot of us putting faith in the administration here. And as I said before, it's about talking and meeting and making sure we're all on the same page, and trusting that they'll allocate based on their word. Because that's what they've done here. They've created something that, based on our feedback, we didn't want all the restrictions. So now it's not restricted. It's got fewer parameters. And now we have to have more faith in the administration itself that they're going to actually follow through with those conversations. So we're kind of caught here, because this is what we asked for in a way. And the three groups, the school committee, the council, and the mayor, will have to work together to allocate these funds and to do it in the best way possible. That's it.
Okay, well, let's first find out if we're going to hold the item. I don't see any other hands. I think we probably all know how we feel on that question at this point. Last chance for comments. Okay, Finance Committee members, if you are in favor of hold, why don't you raise your virtual hand, just because there's a lot of people on the screen. I can't see you all. In favor of hold, raise your hand. Okay, hands down. Opposed to hold, raise your hand. Now I have to figure out where my hand raising is. I haven't done this in a while and it's not showing up, obviously.
Thunder
All right,
reaction.
I'm raising my hand. All right, I see two of us. So motion to hold prevails, and it is held. I believe that concludes our business for the evening. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, everyone. Have a good
We're
night.
adjourned. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you.